The land between two rivers, harsh, sun-bleached, and ancient beyond comprehension, stretches like a parchment inscribed by time itself. Here, in the arid heart of what is now modern-day Iraq, lies a forgotten world, Mesopotamia. Flanked by the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers, this land was once vibrant with life, ambition, and innovation. The name itself, Greek for between rivers, only hints at the profound role this region played in shaping the arc of human history. The soil here was more than fertile. It was generative of ideas, systems, and structures still echoed in our daily lives. It was on this ground that humans first gathered in organized cities, not just as tribes or clans, but as citizens of something greater. Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, and later Babylon, these names carry the weight of millennia. Yet behind their weathered stones and crumbling ziggurats lies a deeper question. How did civilization begin here? And why here, of all places? Archaeologists tell us the Sumerians were among the first to rise. Around 4000 BCE, they began carving their presence into the clay, literally. Cuneiform script, pressed into damp tablets, records their thoughts, their laws, their fears. It is the earliest known writing system, predating even the pyramids of Egypt. In these silent tablets, we glimpse the mind of early humanity, obsessed with grain tallies, temple offerings, the movements of stars, and the will of gods. But cuneiform offers more than bureaucracy. Some tablets hint at cosmologies, epic narratives, and sudden knowledge, an unexpected sophistication. The Epic of Gilgamesh, often cited as the world's first great story, speaks not only of gods and kings, but of existential longing, divine wrath, and ancient floods. Its echoes can be heard in later traditions, in Genesis, in Greek myth, in oral tales scattered across continents. So we begin to ask, how did such advanced thinking emerge so quickly? Was it a natural progression, a slow evolution from tribal life to city-state bureaucracy? Or was there a lost chapter, some catalyst now buried beneath millennia of dust? Mainstream scholars point to environmental necessity. The unpredictable flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates demanded coordinated irrigation. Agriculture flourished, requiring stable settlements. Trade grew, necessitating record-keeping. The gods, reflections of natural forces, became central to keeping chaos at bay. But other voices, quieter and often more controversial, suggest alternate views. Some fringe researchers observe that Mesopotamia's sudden surge in complexity, urban planning, legal systems, metallurgy, astronomy, seems too advanced for its time. They ask, were the Sumerians the inheritors of an older, lost culture? One erased by climate, conflict, or cataclysm? Artifacts unearthed in the ruins of ancient cities sometimes defy easy explanation. Cylinder seals, intricately carved with figures that appear almost mechanistic. Astronomical knowledge precise beyond expectation, charting planets invisible to the naked eye. And then there is the antediluvian king list, a strange document recording the reigns of kings stretching tens of thousands of years into the past, far beyond what conventional history allows. Are these simply myths? Symbolic representations of divine power? Or relics of a forgotten epic, misinterpreted by our modern lens? There are older questions still. Why did the Sumerians, who had no known precursors, speak a language unrelated to any other on Earth? Sumerian is a linguistic isolate, baffling scholars for generations. No known antecedent, no clear descendants. It simply appears in the record, fully formed, along with a pantheon of gods, legal codes, and astronomical data. And the gods themselves, Anu, Enlil, Inanna, Enki, are described not just as abstract deities, but as beings who walked among mortals, who demanded temples, tributes, and occasionally blood. Were these tales purely symbolic, or was there more to the stories? Some have speculated that these accounts preserve memories of real encounters, perhaps with advanced beings, lost civilizations, or remnants of an older age. The Anunnaki, a term found in many Sumerian texts, is often translated as those who came from the heavens. Scholars interpret them as divine archetypes. Others wonder, could these stories be distorted memories of prehistoric contact with something else? Of course, mainstream archaeology does not support these interpretations. The evidence, it argues, points to human ingenuity shaped by geography and necessity. Writing emerged because it was needed. Cities rose from agriculture. Religion grew from uncertainty. Yet the lingering gaps in the record, the unanswered questions, and the impossibly ancient legends keep the mystery alive. Beneath the modern ruins of Iraq, under layers of sediment and centuries of conquest, there are still unexplored sites, still untranslated tablets, still untold stories waiting in the silence. And then there is the simple enigma of time. If civilization began here, over 6,000 years ago, why does so much seem to appear all at once? Not a slow climb, but a sudden ignition. Writing, law, mathematics, architecture, astronomy. As if some spark lit the ancient world, and from it, cities blazed into being. Who lit that spark? And why here, between these two rivers, under this sun? In Mesopotamia, every broken statue and crumbling wall carries a whisper from a world that knew far more than we once believed. But the more we uncover, the more the story deepens. Each answer leads only to more questions. Each discovery, however small, shifts the horizon further away. Perhaps the truth lies not in what we know, but in what we're still learning to hear. A faint echo, carried on desert winds, from a time when gods walked with kings and the stars were maps of fate. And so the mystery remains, buried not in myth, but in the bones of our own forgotten beginnings. The wind shifts over the southern plains of ancient Mesopotamia, rustling over cracked earth and buried time. Here, in the shadows of what was once Eridu, Ur, and the great city of Uruk, we step deeper into the oldest known chapter of the human story, a chapter written not in myth or memory, but in hardened clay. This is Sumer, a land of lowland marshes and rising temple towers, of reeds and rivers, of gods carved into stone and names impressed into tablets, a place where something remarkable happened, something that would change the course of human history forever. The invention of writing. It began modestly. Around 3200 BCE, in a dusty city-state nestled between the rivers, people began pressing marks into wet clay with the edge of a sharpened reed. These marks, simple pictographs at first, were not intended to be read aloud as stories, but as tools, tallies of grain, lists of livestock, temple accounts. Writing, as we first encounter it, was born from the demands of organization and trade. But almost as soon as it appears, writing begins to evolve. What started as pictures soon abstracted into symbols, and symbols into syllables. The early Sumerians developed cuneiform, a wedge-shaped script as elegant as it is practical. No longer limited to commerce, it soon captured laws, hymns, prayers, treaties, even dreams. The people of Sumer had found a way to preserve the voice of the moment, frozen in time. Why here? Why not in Egypt first, or in the Indus Valley, or the highlands of Anatolia? Historians point to necessity. The explosive growth of Sumerian cities, with their temples, granaries, and trading networks, created an urgent need for record-keeping. As bureaucracies expanded, so too did the script. Writing became power. Those who could read and inscribe, scribes, were elevated, gatekeepers of knowledge in a society that now depended on the permanence of symbols. But still, questions linger. From its very first appearance, Sumerian writing reveals an unexpected level of sophistication. Some tablets suggest a grasp of mathematics based on a base 60 system that underpins our measurement of time and circles to this day. Others record astronomical calculations, religious rites, even philosophical musings. And then there is the language itself. Sumerian is a linguistic orphan, a language isolate, unrelated to any known tongue before or after. It is not Semitic like Akkadian. It is not Indo-European. It does not fit into any known family. It simply appears, fully formed, with grammar and complexity and poetic structure. Where did it come from? Was it the product of a slow evolution lost to time, or the inheritance of an even earlier culture, one now erased from the archaeological record? Among the oldest texts we find are the so-called lexical lists, long, curated inventories of words, objects, deities, and professions. These were not purely utilitarian. They reflect a civilization deeply concerned with categorizing its world, as if trying to recall a structure that once was, or perhaps to recreate one. And then comes a striking moment in the history of writing, the Kish tablet, often considered the oldest known example of true writing. Dated before 3000 BCE, it shows proto-cuneiform symbols. But even then, there's no clear precursor. No progression of simpler marks leading to complexity. Just a sudden leap. Was this truly the first time humanity wrote anything down? Or is it simply the first that has survived? Some researchers have speculated, cautiously, on the possibility of a lost script. Evidence of symbolic notation dating back over 20,000 years has been found in Upper Paleolithic caves, but these are not considered writing in the traditional sense. Still, the parallels are curious. Is it possible that Sumerian writing was not an invention, but a rediscovery? A remembrance of an older system, once forgotten? Ancient Mesopotamian texts themselves speak of earlier ages, of antediluvian kings who ruled before the Great Flood, whose knowledge was passed down from the gods. These rulers, some supposedly reigning for thousands of years, appear in the Sumerian king list, a document blending history and myth. The idea of writing as a divine gift is not unique to Sumer. It is a motif echoed in civilizations across the globe. In Sumer, the god Nisaba was said to be the patroness of writing and accounting. Later, scribes offered devotion to Nabu, the god of wisdom and scribes. These deities were not abstract. They were believed to have walked among the people, guiding the hands of those who etched words into clay. Was this reverence mere myth-making? Or does it reflect something else? Some cultural memory of a time when knowledge came from outside the ordinary? Fringe theorists have long pointed to the Anunnaki, the so-called sky beings of Sumerian lore, as possible bearers of civilization, entities who taught humans agriculture, metallurgy, astronomy, and perhaps writing. While mainstream scholars interpret these figures symbolically, the richness of their narratives cannot be ignored. In tablets and temple inscriptions, they are described not as metaphors, but as kings, judges, architects. It raises a subtle but compelling question. Could the Sumerians themselves have believed they were not the first, but the inheritors of a legacy far older? Even the architecture of the written word carries mystery. Many early tablets are ritualistic, sealed and stored in temple archives. Some are meant to be read only by divine eyes. Others are curses, legal decrees, or star charts so precise they still baffle modern historians. How did a people in the 4th millennium BCE understand the synodic cycles of Venus? Why did they track lunar eclipses with such care? And how is it that their numerical system, awkward by modern standards, was so perfectly suited to celestial calculation? The story of writing in Sumer is not just about clay and reeds. It is a mirror to the human mind as it awakens to memory, abstraction, and meaning. And in that reflection, we see both clarity and enigma. As we turn each tablet, translate each faded mark, we come closer, but never quite arrive, at the full truth of what was written. And why? And somewhere, beneath the layers of ancient earth and centuries of forgetting, more tablets wait. More voices paused in time. More questions without answers. What else remains, buried in silence, waiting to be read once again? The clay tablets told stories. The symbols held knowledge. But it was the cities, their walls, canals, towers, that gave these stories shape in the world. In the quiet dawn of prehistory, long before steel or concrete, something astonishing took root on the alluvial plains of southern Mesopotamia. Amid shifting rivers, rising floodwaters, and scorching sun, humans began building in a way they never had before. They did not build mere shelters. They built cities. The Sumerians were the first to shape the land into permanent, complex communities. Uruk, Eridu, Nippur, and Lagash. Cities with temples that pierced the sky. Cities with central courtyards, sacred precincts, workshops, and carefully organized streets. These were not haphazard collections of huts. They were engineered spaces, designed with intention and knowledge. But where did that knowledge come from? The earliest signs of urbanization in Sumer appear around 4000 BCE, during the Ubaid period. Small villages began to coalesce into larger settlements. Mud brick became the material of choice, abundant, workable, and, when sun-dried, surprisingly durable. Yet it wasn't just the materials that made these cities remarkable. It was the systems behind them. Massive canal networks were dug by hand, redirecting water from unpredictable rivers to nourish crops and sustain growing populations. Some of these irrigation systems extended for miles, requiring advanced surveying, planning, and long-term maintenance. How did early Sumerians manage this feat of hydraulic engineering without formal mathematics or modern tools? Archaeologists point to generations of trial and error, ingenuity born from necessity. But the scale and precision of these early works suggest more than experimentation. They reflect a deep, organized understanding of landscape, climate, and labor, something akin to an ancient science. By 3200 BCE, Uruk had become a true city in every sense of the word, home to perhaps 40,000 people, with massive public buildings, administrative districts, storage complexes, and the first monumental architecture of Mesopotamia, the ziggurat. These stepped temples, raised high above the flat earth, dominated the skyline. Constructed from hundreds of thousands of mud bricks, the ziggurats were not mere buildings. They were platforms reaching toward the heavens. They served as both religious sanctuaries and symbols of central authority. But how were they built? Without beasts of burden or the wheel in widespread use, construction would have required extraordinary manpower, coordination, and foresight. Brickmakers, transporters, planners, and laborers, hundreds, perhaps thousands, working in concert. It speaks to a level of organization and social hierarchy that, according to some theories, appeared too quickly to be purely organic. Could the knowledge to build these cities have come from an earlier, forgotten culture? Some fringe thinkers have proposed that the sudden emergence of urban planning in Sumer suggests inheritance rather than invention. They point to similarities between Sumerian city plans and much later civilizations: grids, ceremonial centers, irrigation channels that follow astronomical alignments. Others look to the myths themselves. Sumerian texts claim that cities were gifts of the gods, handed down to humanity in the antediluvian age. The god Enki is said to have bestowed the Mi, divine decrees governing all aspects of civilization, from kingship to carpentry. The city of Eridu, in particular, is described as the first city ever created, rising not by chance, but by divine design. Is it possible that these stories are echoes of real events? Preserved memories of a time when knowledge was passed down from an unknown source? More tangible, perhaps, are the artifacts that have been unearthed from beneath these ancient cities. Clay tablets that detail construction processes, labor quotas, and temple inventories. Blueprints etched in stylized symbols, but even in their detail, they raise questions. How did early Sumerians determine load-bearing structures? How did they manage logistics for buildings as large as temples and ziggurats without written contracts, before writing had fully developed? One possibility is that oral tradition preserved complex knowledge long before it was recorded, that generations of master builders and artisans passed techniques by memory, refined through practice. But even this leaves a gap. Why does so much appear all at once? At the start of the 3rd millennium BCE, cities across Sumer seemed to flourish simultaneously, not gradually, but in a wave. Uniformity appears in the layout of temples, the structure of homes, even in drainage systems. This coordinated development across dozens of settlements is difficult to explain. Some have speculated on the existence of an earlier centralized culture, now lost, that seeded these patterns. Others wonder if environmental factors, such as a rare climatic stability or a lull in conflict, created the conditions for such widespread growth. And then there is the question of purpose. Were these cities merely centers of trade and governance, or did they serve something more? The orientation of ziggurats, the ceremonial pathways, the sacred geometry embedded in their foundations, all hint at a symbolic layer beneath the practical one. Were Sumerian cities spiritual machines, maps of the heavens drawn upon the earth? Or were they something else entirely? Devices to connect earth and sky, built not just to house people, but to honor or perhaps summon something more? Of course, mainstream scholars caution against overinterpreting such alignments. They argue that the religious and civic aspects of Sumerian life were deeply intertwined and that practical and symbolic structures naturally overlapped. Still, the sense of mystery endures. Even now, thousands of years later, with satellite scans and excavation reports, the full story of how these cities were built and why remains elusive. Beneath layers of mud and myth, we glimpse only fragments. And perhaps, buried under the unmarked sands of time, there are still cities yet to be uncovered. Lost settlements swallowed by river shifts or rising salt, forgotten blueprints, silent ziggurats, tools of builders whose names were never recorded. So we are left to wonder, were the Sumerians truly the first to build in stone and symbol? Or were they remembering something older, deeper, passed down not through writing, but through shadow and song? The cities remain, quiet, enduring, their bricks weathered, their roads faded, but their mystery still intact. Imagine a voice carried across millennia, faint, fragmented, yet profoundly distinct. It is the voice of the Sumerians, spoken in a language unlike any other. Nestled deep within the archaeological record of ancient Mesopotamia lies one of humanity's most puzzling legacies, the Sumerian language. Its script, etched onto clay tablets and monumental inscriptions, speaks to us across the vast gulf of time. But the language itself remains an enigma. Unlike Akkadian or later Babylonian dialects, which belong to the Semitic language family, Sumerian stands alone. It is what linguists call a language isolate, with no known relatives, no clear ancestors, and no descendants. It simply appears in the historical record, fully formed, flourishing around 3100 BCE, and mysteriously fading out by roughly 2000 BCE, as Akkadian gradually took over. What does this mean? How could a language so complex and structured exist in isolation, with no linguistic family tree? The Sumerian tongue was rich and expressive, capable of conveying everything from everyday commerce to poetry, legal codes, myths, and prayers. It was the language of administration and religion, of science and diplomacy. Scribes painstakingly inscribed it using cuneiform symbols, themselves evolving from pictographs to abstract wedge-shaped marks. Each sign could represent a word, a syllable, or an idea, requiring immense skill and memorization. Yet the origins of this language remain shrouded. Traditional linguistic theories suggest that Sumerian developed locally among the earliest urban communities in southern Mesopotamia. But this raises questions. If it emerged locally, why does it bear no resemblance to surrounding languages, neither Semitic nor Indo-European? Why does its grammar and vocabulary stand apart? Theories abound. Some scholars propose that Sumerian descends from a lost language family that disappeared with the rise of later civilizations, swallowed by the tides of cultural and linguistic change. Others speculate it might be connected, however distantly, to languages of the Caucasus, or even further afield, though no conclusive links have been found. More intriguingly, the sudden appearance of Sumerian in written form, as if fully developed, has led some to ponder whether it might represent the remnants of an ancient, advanced culture predating the known Sumerians. A civilization whose traces lie buried beneath layers of flood deposits and forgotten history. Could Sumerian be a linguistic fossil, preserving echoes of an older world? The texts themselves offer tantalizing clues. Sumerian literature is filled with references to before-the-flood times, kings with reigns spanning tens of thousands of years, and gods who imparted wisdom. These elements hint at a cultural memory stretching far beyond the archaeological timeline. At the same time, the decline of the Sumerian language is equally mysterious. Around 2000 BCE, it ceased to be spoken conversationally, yet continued as a scholarly and liturgical language for centuries, much like Latin in medieval Europe. Why did this shift occur? Was it a peaceful transition as Akkadian dominance grew, or were there deeper social and political upheavals that erased the native tongue? There is also the intriguing relationship between Sumerian and Akkadian. Despite belonging to different linguistic families, the two languages coexisted in a remarkable bilingual milieu. Many Akkadian scribes learned Sumerian to access religious and administrative texts. Over time, they influenced each other, borrowing vocabulary and grammatical elements. This intertwining suggests a complex cultural and intellectual exchange, but it also raises questions about identity, power, and memory. Why preserve a language no longer spoken? What cultural weight did Sumerian carry that warranted its survival in temple libraries and official records long after everyday use vanished? Some fringe theories extend this mystery further. A few have posited that Sumerian, with its unique grammar and vocabulary, may encode lost knowledge, mathematical concepts, cosmological frameworks, or even secret wisdom transmitted by unknown agents. The Sumerians' advanced understanding of astronomy and mathematics embedded in their texts lends a strange aura to these speculations. Is the language itself a key to unlocking deeper truths about human origins and ancient knowledge? Or are we projecting modern desires onto an ancient linguistic puzzle? The difficulties of deciphering Sumerian only deepen the mystery. Although cuneiform was cracked in the 19th century, many nuances remain elusive. The precise pronunciation is debated. Some signs have multiple meanings or phonetic values that shift depending on context, and many texts are fragmentary or damaged, leaving gaps that scholars can only fill with educated guesses. Every new tablet discovered brings both clarity and confusion, words that challenge existing dictionaries, idioms that resist translation, symbols whose meanings remain uncertain. And so the Sumerian language lives on as both a monument and a riddle. It embodies the remarkable intellectual achievements of a people who laid the foundations of civilization, yet it also reminds us of what may have been lost to time. What stories, what wisdom, what world views have vanished with the fading of this language? As we listen closely to the faint echoes of Sumerian, inscribed in clay and whispered by ancient scribes, we are left with profound questions. Is language itself the true key to understanding the past? And how much of that past remains forever out of reach, hidden behind a wall of silence? The Sumerian tongue, mysterious and magnificent, still waits, quietly, beneath the dust of millennia, inviting us to listen, to learn, and to wonder. Continuing from the language and scripts of Sumer, we now turn to a different kind of artifact. One smaller in size, yet infinitely rich in meaning, mystery, and artistry, the cylinder seal. In the flickering light of an ancient workshop, a craftsman delicately carves intricate designs into a small, smooth cylinder of stone. These cylinders, no larger than a finger, would come to hold immense power, not through their size, but through the impressions they could leave. Cylinder seals are among the most evocative relics of ancient Mesopotamia. Rolled across wet clay, they leave behind tiny, continuous scenes, complex narratives composed of gods, animals, humans, and enigmatic symbols. These impressions were not mere decoration. They served as signatures, identity markers, and protective talismans. A seal was a personal or official stamp, securing documents, containers, even doors. In a world where writing was still rare and laborious, these small cylinders held great administrative and social importance. But beyond their practical use lies a deeper, enduring mystery. The earliest cylinder seals appear around 3500 BCE, contemporaneous with the rise of Sumerian city-states and the invention of writing. Yet, their origins and symbolic language remain puzzling. Unlike cuneiform script, which over time gained a systematic structure, the imagery on seals is fluid and often cryptic. The scenes frequently depict mythological or religious motifs, but their precise meanings elude definitive interpretation. Why were these images chosen? What stories did they tell to those who viewed them? And what did these tiny masterpieces mean to the people who bore them? Many seals show divine figures interacting with humans, gods bestowing blessings, mythical creatures guarding sacred spaces. Some depict scenes of hunting or combat, while others feature abstract geometric patterns. Their artistic styles vary widely across regions and eras, suggesting a rich cultural exchange and evolution of symbolic language. The craftsmanship is remarkable. Artisans carved these seals from precious stones, lapis lazuli, carnelian, hematite, with astonishing detail and precision. Every line was purposeful, every figure a deliberate choice. One seal, discovered in the ruins of Uruk, portrays a procession of figures moving towards a towering temple. Another, from Lagash, depicts a battle between a warrior and a monstrous hybrid beast. These images seem to capture more than history. They hint at mythology, ritual, and perhaps even secret knowledge. This raises the question, did cylinder seals function solely as practical identifiers, or did they also serve as vehicles of esoteric meaning? Some scholars propose that seals acted as magical talismans, believed to protect the owner or the contents of sealed containers from evil forces. Their repeated use in religious and administrative contexts supports this theory. Could they have been amulets, blending the sacred with the everyday? Moreover, the specific iconography of many seals defies easy translation. Despite decades of study, experts remain divided on the exact symbolism behind certain figures and motifs. The seal's images may have represented stories lost to time, myths, allegories, or secret codes known only to an elite class of priests and scribes. Others suggest that seals were part of a proto-writing system, visual narratives conveying information beyond the phonetic script of cuneiform. Could these impressions be an early attempt to communicate complex ideas symbolically, through images rather than words? Even more enigmatic are the seals' distribution and use. They have been found far beyond Mesopotamia, scattered across the ancient Near East, Persia, and the Indus Valley. Their spread implies trade, cultural exchange, or possibly shared religious beliefs. Yet the designs adapted to local traditions, showing that while the concept traveled, its meanings were reinterpreted. This complexity has led to more speculative ideas. Could the cylinder seals represent a coded language, accessible only to those trained in their symbolic lexicon? Were they a form of visual encryption, safeguarding knowledge or rituals from the uninitiated? Some have even linked certain motifs to astronomical symbols, proposing that seals encoded cosmic information or calendrical data, but such theories remain tentative. The challenge lies in balancing imagination with evidence. While it is tempting to project modern ideas of encryption or secret societies onto these ancient objects, the reality may be more subtle, rooted in the interplay between religion, identity, and administration. An additional layer of mystery lies in the seal's role in social structure. Ownership of a seal was a mark of status and authority. To possess one was to assert identity and legitimacy, a physical extension of one's power. How did this affect interpersonal and political dynamics in the fractious city-states of Sumer? Could seals have been used to forge alliances or to symbolize membership within certain cults or guilds? How did their iconography evolve to reflect shifts in power, religion, or cultural influence? Yet, despite the many questions, one fact remains certain. Cylinder seals encapsulate a fusion of art, function, and belief. They are miniature portals into the worldview of an ancient civilization, carrying stories and secrets locked in clay impressions. As we hold these artifacts in our minds, we sense the hands that carved them, the eyes that rolled them, and the minds that understood them. But do we truly understand the full spectrum of their meaning? Or are we merely glimpsing fragments of a lost symbolic language whose grammar and syntax remain forever out of reach? The cylinder seals endure, silent witnesses to a world that valued the power of image and symbol as much as words. They remind us that ancient communication was as much about visual storytelling and sacred identity as it was about written script. So, what messages remain hidden in these ancient impressions? What stories, prayers, or spells have vanished beneath the shifting sands of time? Perhaps the seals still guard secrets, waiting patiently for those who can read between the lines of history and myth. From the silent impressions of cylinder seals, we turn now to the voices those images represent. The gods and goddesses who once ruled the vast skies and shifting winds above Mesopotamia. These deities were more than myth. They formed the invisible framework on which early civilization anchored its understanding of the world. Across the flat, fertile plains cradled between the Tigris and Euphrates, the Sumerians looked upward, not just with curiosity, but with reverence and awe. The heavens were alive, a realm inhabited by powerful forces that shaped their lives, their fate, and their very existence. To them, the wind that stirred the reeds, the shifting clouds overhead, the blazing sun, and the silent stars were manifestations of divine beings, entities with will, intent, and profound influence. At the heart of this celestial hierarchy was An, the god of the sky, vast, eternal, and elusive. An was the Great Father, the primal expanse that contained all other gods. His presence was felt rather than seen, an infinite dome under which all life unfolded. Beneath him dwelled Enlil, the lord of wind and storm, who breathed life and destruction into the world. His breath could bring fertility or famine, calm, or chaos. The very air was a medium of his power. But who were these gods, truly? How did the Sumerians conceive of such forces? Were they merely personifications of natural phenomena, or something more? The stories passed down in cuneiform tablets paint rich portraits. An, Enlil, and Enki, the god of water and wisdom, formed a triad of immense authority. Enki, in particular, is enigmatic, a benefactor of humanity, a keeper of secret knowledge, sometimes described as the architect of civilization itself. His domain over fresh water contrasted with Enlil's dominion over the wind and air. Together they represented the dynamic interplay of elemental forces. Yet the myths also reveal tensions, rivalries between gods, cosmic battles, and shifts in divine power that mirror the changing fortunes of human rulers. For instance, Enlil's authority waxed and waned, challenged by other deities or by humanity itself. One compelling question lingers. Were these divine conflicts reflections of real historical upheavals, encoded as allegory? Did the gods represent ancient kings, tribes, or natural disasters anthropomorphized into eternal characters? The pantheon grew over time, absorbing gods from neighboring cultures, evolving in name and role but maintaining a complex tapestry of interrelations. Ishtar, goddess of love and war, brought a paradoxical duality, creation and destruction intertwined. Nana, the moon god, governed the rhythms of time and tides, his cycles marking the passage of months and seasons. But what remains most mysterious is the origin of these deities. How did the first human communities conceive such elaborate divine hierarchies? Did they arise spontaneously from collective imagination, or were they inherited from an even older, unknown tradition? Some scholars have speculated about the possible influence of earlier or lost civilizations, whose spiritual frameworks might have shaped Sumerian beliefs. Others propose that the gods emerged as a way to make sense of the unpredictable and often violent environment, the floods, droughts, and storms that shaped life in Mesopotamia. Intriguingly, archaeological findings have uncovered temples and shrines dedicated to these gods with rituals that suggest not only worship but attempts to commune, negotiate, or even control these forces. What did such interactions mean to those early priests? Were they intermediaries in a cosmic dialogue, or wielders of secret power? The symbols associated with each deity, ranging from the horned crown of An to the lion of Ishtar, carry layers of meaning that scholars continue to decode. Some interpretations hint at astronomical connections, as the gods may have been linked to celestial bodies or cycles. Could the pantheon have functioned as an ancient form of cosmic map, guiding not only spiritual practice but practical knowledge of astronomy and timekeeping? Yet many aspects of Mesopotamian religion resist full understanding. The nature of the divine was fluid, sometimes contradictory, and deeply tied to the human condition. The gods were capricious, demanding, yet intimately involved in daily affairs. Their stories blend morality, power, and mystery. What do these myths tell us about the Mesopotamian worldview, about their hopes, fears, and concepts of order and chaos? And what might remain hidden beneath the layers of myth, waiting to be uncovered? Lost rituals, forgotten gods, or spiritual knowledge concealed by time and language? As we explore the pantheon of sky and wind, we touch the very essence of human attempts to grasp the unknown. The gods remain silent, yet their echoes resonate through history, inviting us to wonder how deeply their presence shaped the earliest chapters of civilization. What truths lie beyond the myths, and how much of that ancient wisdom is still buried beneath the shifting sands of Mesopotamia? From the gods who shaped the heavens and winds, we now descend into a world more intimate, one where divine power meets human fragility. The ancient city of Uruk with its towering walls and bustling streets, was home to a story that has echoed through millennia: the Epic of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. The tale begins with Gilgamesh himself, a figure larger than life, part man, part god, a king whose strength and ambition knew no bounds. He was said to be 2/3 divine, endowed with might and wisdom, yet burdened by the weight of his own mortality. His people revered and feared him, trapped between admiration and despair under his relentless rule. Into this world steps Enkidu, a wild man fashioned by the gods as a counterpart to Gilgamesh, an embodiment of nature's untamed force, living among animals, ignorant of civilization's bounds. Their meeting, violent at first, quickly evolves into a profound friendship that would challenge the very fabric of human existence. The Epic of Gilgamesh is among the oldest known literary works, inscribed on clay tablets nearly 4,000 years ago. It tells of their adventures, battles with monsters, journeys to forbidden realms, and quests for immortality. Yet, beneath the surface of heroic exploits lies a meditation on what it means to be human. The story's central tension is mortality, Gilgamesh's struggle to understand death and find meaning beyond it. When Enkidu falls ill and dies, Gilgamesh is plunged into grief and fear, launching him on a quest to uncover the secret of eternal life. This quest leads him to strange lands and enigmatic figures: an immortal flood survivor, a mystical plant promising rejuvenation, each episode steeped in symbolism and mystery. But how much of this epic is rooted in history, and how much in myth? Was Gilgamesh a real king whose deeds were magnified through generations, or a composite of several rulers and legends? Archaeological excavations at Uruk have uncovered royal tombs and inscriptions, hinting at powerful leaders, but the line between fact and fiction blurs. Moreover, the epic's themes resonate beyond its time and place, touching on universal questions. What is the price of greatness? How do we confront loss and the inevitability of death? What wisdom can suffering reveal? Some scholars suggest that the narrative's origins may trace back even further than the surviving tablets, passed down through oral tradition. The story's survival in multiple versions, Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, reflects its profound cultural significance and adaptability. Intriguingly, the Epic of Gilgamesh contains motifs and episodes echoed in later religious and literary traditions worldwide. The flood story, for instance, bears striking parallels to narratives in the Bible and elsewhere. Is this a coincidence, a shared cultural memory, or evidence of ancient exchanges? The character of Enkidu itself raises questions. As a bridge between wild nature and civilized society, his transformation symbolizes humanity's complex relationship with the natural world. Was this figure inspired by real cultural practices, or does he represent an archetype common across civilizations? The epic also invites us to consider ancient Mesopotamian views on friendship, leadership, and divine interaction. The gods in the story are powerful but often capricious, agents of fate rather than benevolent protectors. How did these portrayals shape societal norms and individual aspirations? Yet, many mysteries linger. The original tablets are fragmented, their stories incomplete. Some lines are lost to time, some interpretations debated. What nuances have been erased? What meanings were once clear to ancient audiences but remain opaque to us? Furthermore, the quest for immortality that drives Gilgamesh speaks to a perennial human longing. Is the epic suggesting that immortality lies not in physical life, but in memory, legacy, or wisdom? If so, how does this ancient perspective inform our modern understanding of life and death? The tale's enduring power lies in its ability to evoke empathy and reflection. It transports us to a time when myth and reality intertwined, when kings and gods walked the earth in stories that shaped cultures and beliefs. As we immerse ourselves in Gilgamesh and Enkidu's journey, we are reminded that beneath the grandeur of ancient empires and divine myths lies a deeply human story, a quest for meaning amid the certainty of mortality. What secrets remain hidden in the shadows of this epic? What truths did the ancient scribes hope to preserve? And how might these ancient words continue to illuminate our own search for understanding in an ever-changing world? Emerging from the Epic of Gilgamesh, we encounter one of the most haunting and enduring tales of ancient Mesopotamia, the Great Flood. Long before it found its way into biblical texts, the flood story was etched in clay tablets, whispered across millennia as a warning, a memory, and a mystery. Imagine the land where the Tigris and Euphrates carve their winding paths, an ancient world vulnerable to the forces of water, both life-giving and destructive. To the Mesopotamians, water was sacred yet fearsome, capable of cleansing and annihilation. The flood myth captures this duality in stark relief. A catastrophic deluge sent by the gods to purge humanity, sparing only the righteous survivor who preserves life and wisdom. The Sumerian and later Babylonian versions of the flood story appear on several cuneiform tablets, most famously in the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis epic. These texts describe a divine decision to wipe out humankind, a great vessel built by the hero, Atrahasis or Utnapishtim, depending on the version, to survive the wrathful waters. After days of relentless rain and rising seas, the flood recedes, and life begins anew. What makes this story remarkable is its antiquity and influence. Written some 4,000 years ago, it predates the earliest known biblical flood accounts by centuries. Yet, the parallels are unmistakable. A godly decree, a chosen man, a vast ark, the release of birds to find dry land. This shared narrative invites profound questions about the origins and transmission of ancient myths. Were these flood stories born from actual catastrophic events, massive river floods or sudden climate shifts that left deep impressions on early civilizations? Geological studies reveal that the Mesopotamian floodplain experienced significant flooding episodes in the distant past. Could such disasters have sparked collective memory, crystallizing into the legends we now read? Yet, the story is not simply an ancient record of environmental catastrophe. It carries complex layers of theology, ethics, and human-divine relationships. Why would the gods, creators and protectors, choose destruction? Is the flood a divine punishment for humanity's arrogance or disobedience, or a necessary cleansing to restore cosmic order? Intriguingly, the flood tale also touches on themes of survival and renewal. The hero's journey to preserve life on a vessel can be read as an allegory for resilience and hope amid destruction. What did this mean to the ancient Mesopotamians, living under constant threat from unpredictable natural forces? The flood narrative's transmission across cultures and epics adds to its enigma. Some scholars argue that it spread through oral traditions and migrations, influencing other civilizations in the Near East and beyond. Others see it as a common archetype, an expression of universal human fears about nature's power and mortality. Then there are more speculative ideas. Could the flood myth encode forgotten knowledge of ancient cataclysms, perhaps linked to rising sea levels after the last ice age? Or might it symbolize deeper psychological or spiritual truths, representing cycles of death and rebirth within human consciousness? At the same time, the story's rich symbolism invites alternative interpretations. The ark could represent not just a physical vessel, but a metaphorical refuge, knowledge, culture, or divine favor preserved against chaos. The release of birds, often a raven or dove, may signify hope, guidance, or communication between earth and sky. Artifacts and texts related to the flood have been found scattered throughout Mesopotamia, but their contexts and meanings are often ambiguous. What rituals accompanied the retelling of the flood? How did the myth shape religious practices or societal values? Moreover, the flood story's place within the broader Mesopotamian worldview remains complex. It is neither a simple moral tale nor a literal history, but a fusion of both. Part cosmic drama, part human experience. How did ancient people reconcile the terrifying image of divine destruction with their belief in benevolent gods? The enduring fascination with the flood story lies in its ability to evoke both awe and reflection. It confronts us with questions about our relationship to nature, the divine, and each other. It reminds us that even in ancient times, humanity grappled with forces beyond understanding, seeking meaning in catastrophe. As we trace the ripples of this ancient flood myth, we must ask, what truths lie submerged beneath layers of time and translation? What aspects of human memory and culture does this story preserve? And how might the flood narrative continue to shape our collective imagination and identity today? The waters of history are deep and murky. But in the currents of the great flood legend, we glimpse not only ancient fears and hopes, but an invitation to explore the mysteries still hidden beneath the surface. From the deluge that reshaped the world, our journey turns upward, toward the infinite tapestry of stars that stretched over ancient Mesopotamia's night skies. Here, beneath the vast celestial dome, the priests and scholars of early civilizations sought to decipher the hidden language of the cosmos. The Mesopotamian night was more than darkness. It was a living map, dotted with shimmering constellations and wandering lights that moved with strange rhythms. For those early observers, the heavens were an extension of the divine realm, a stage where gods and fate revealed themselves. Every star, every planet, was imbued with significance, a symbol encoded with meaning, waiting to be read. Priests became the interpreters of this cosmic script. Their sacred duty was to watch, record, and predict, linking the motions of celestial bodies with events on Earth. Using detailed star charts and cuneiform tablets, they tracked the moon's phases, the shifting positions of planets, and the cycles of the sun. These observations formed the foundation of what we now recognize as astrology and divination. But this was not mere superstition. Mesopotamian astrology was a complex system intertwined with religion, politics, and daily life. Kings sought the priests' guidance before battles or building projects. The welfare of the city depended, in part, on celestial approval. How could such knowledge have developed? Was it the result of centuries of meticulous observation or inspired revelation? Among the most enigmatic practices was the Enuma, Anu, and Lil, a vast compendium of omens and predictions tied to celestial phenomena. It cataloged eclipses, comets, unusual planetary alignments, and their supposed portents. Yet, many questions remain. How did ancient scholars interpret these signs? Did they foresee natural disasters, political upheaval, or personal fortunes? And how accurate were their predictions? The link between stars and human fate raises deeper mysteries. Did the Mesopotamians perceive destiny as written in the sky, or was the celestial language more fluid, open to interpretation and change? Did they believe in free will, or were they resigned to a cosmic script beyond their control? Further intrigue arises from archaeological findings. Temples and ziggurats were often aligned with astronomical phenomena. The very design of cities and monuments sometimes mirrored celestial patterns. What was the purpose behind this cosmic architecture? Was it meant to harmonize earthly and heavenly realms, to channel divine power, or serve as giant observatories? Speculative theories have long tried to unlock hidden meanings. Some suggest that the priests' knowledge encoded advanced astronomy or even early forms of mathematical understanding. Could there be lost insights about the universe concealed within their texts, waiting to be uncovered? Others propose that the symbolic language of stars served as a mnemonic device, preserving myths and histories under the guise of celestial observation. If so, what stories remain veiled within these constellations? The role of divination extended beyond the heavens too, examining entrails, dreams, and omens in everyday life. How did these practices intersect with astrology? Were they complementary parts of a unified system of knowledge, or distinct ways of engaging with the divine? In modern times, the influence of Mesopotamian astrology echoes faintly through later cultures and belief systems, yet the original intentions and understandings remain elusive. How much have we lost in translation and time? As we gaze upward alongside those ancient priests, we are invited into a realm where science, spirituality, and mystery intertwine. The stars above Mesopotamia may seem distant, but their glow touches the core of human curiosity, our desire to know what lies beyond and within. What secrets do the stars still hold? What cosmic truths might still be hidden in the texts, temples, and skies of ancient Mesopotamia? And how might our ancestors' celestial gaze continue to shape the way we understand our place in the universe? As the stars continue to shimmer above the ancient plains of Mesopotamia, our gaze turns to those mysterious figures who bridge the realms of divine myth and earthly power, the Anunnaki. In the shadowed temples and sacred texts of the Sumerians and their successors, these enigmatic beings emerge, cloaked in both reverence and ambiguity. The Anunnaki, often translated as those who came from the heavens, are depicted as a pantheon of gods who shaped the cosmos, governed natural forces, and influenced the fate of humanity. Their presence pervades countless myths, from creation stories to tales of kingship and judgment. But who, or what, were the Anunnaki truly? In the earliest texts, the Anunnaki are portrayed as divine arbiters, wielding authority over the earth and the underworld alike. They were believed to dispense justice, grant kingship, and oversee the cycles of life and death. Yet their identities and roles vary widely, shifting across time and city-states. Some tablets list them as high gods, while others suggest more distant or shadowy figures. The name Anunnaki itself evokes questions. Does it mean simply offspring of Anu, the sky god? Or does it imply beings from a realm beyond human comprehension? Were they ancestral deities, cosmic forces personified, or something else entirely? Archaeological and textual evidence grounds the Anunnaki firmly within the religious and social fabric of Mesopotamian civilization. Kings often claimed divine sanction through connections to these gods, suggesting the Anunnaki's power extended into political legitimacy. Temples, rituals, and prayers invoked them regularly, underscoring their central role. Yet, despite their prominence, much about the Anunnaki remains veiled. Some depictions are contradictory or incomplete, leaving historians to piece together fragmented narratives. Were the Anunnaki benevolent guardians, harsh judges, or capricious beings beyond mortal understanding? Adding complexity, modern interpretations have often reimagined the Anunnaki through speculative lenses. Popular theories propose they were ancient astronauts, extraterrestrial visitors who influenced early human civilization. While such ideas capture the imagination, they stray far from the ancient texts' original contexts. Could the Anunnaki mythos reflect ancient peoples' attempts to explain origins and power through figures larger than life? Or might these beings symbolize natural phenomena, cosmic principles, or social hierarchies personified? What do these interpretations reveal about human storytelling and our search for meaning? Intriguingly, some scholars point to the fluidity of the Anunnaki's nature, sometimes gods, sometimes spirits, sometimes ancestors, as a window into Mesopotamian concepts of divinity and the afterlife. How did the ancients reconcile such multiplicity in a single pantheon? Moreover, the Anunnaki's link to kingship raises questions about the relationship between religion and authority. Did rulers genuinely believe they were chosen by these gods, or was this a political tool to consolidate power? How did common people perceive these celestial overlords? The Anunnaki also appear in myths of creation and the flood, interwoven with other deities and heroes. Their actions in these stories carry moral and cosmic weight, setting laws, punishing hubris, or granting salvation. What lessons did these myths intend to impart, and how were they understood by ancient audiences? Despite millennia of study, the Anunnaki's full significance remains elusive. The cuneiform tablets preserve fragments, names, rituals, hymns, but the lived experience and beliefs behind them are harder to grasp. What mysteries might still lie buried in forgotten archives or yet to be deciphered texts? As we explore the figure of the Anunnaki, we confront a broader enigma: how ancient civilizations conceived the divine and their place in the universe. Were the Anunnaki simply gods of old, or do they embody something deeper, an archetype of power, mystery, and the unknown? What shadows linger behind their ancient names? What truths remain obscured by time and translation? The story of the Anunnaki invites us to consider not just what ancient Mesopotamians believed, but how those beliefs continue to challenge and inspire us today. From the shadowed realms of gods and kings, our journey now draws near to a figure who transformed Mesopotamia in ways that would echo through history: the enigmatic Sargon the Great. Known as the architect of the world's first empire, Sargon's name carries the weight of ambition, power, and mystery, woven into the very fabric of ancient civilization. Picture the fertile plains of the Tigris and Euphrates, where city-states rose and fell in a mosaic of rivalries and alliances. Into this turbulent landscape stepped Sargon, a man whose origins are as compelling as his achievements. Ancient inscriptions tell of a humble beginning. Some say he was a cupbearer to a king, others that he was found floating in a basket on a river, a motif echoing later myths across cultures. Yet, beyond legend, what do we truly know about this first emperor? Sargon forged an empire unlike any before it, uniting disparate city-states under a single rule stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. This unprecedented political and military feat reshaped the concept of governance and power. But how did he accomplish such consolidation? Was it sheer military prowess, shrewd diplomacy, or something more elusive? Historical records reveal that Sargon established a capital, Akkad, a city whose exact location remains debated among archaeologists. Akkad symbolized the heart of his empire, a melting pot of cultures, languages, and ideas. Yet, despite its importance, the city has vanished beneath layers of time, its ruins still undiscovered. What secrets does Akkad hold? What treasures of history lie buried beneath the earth? The inscriptions attributed to Sargon portray him as divinely sanctioned, chosen by the gods to bring order. Was this divine backing genuine belief, or a political narrative crafted to legitimize his rule? How did the interplay of religion and authority shape his reign and legacy? Sargon's empire introduced innovations in administration, standardizing weights, measures, and laws across vast territories. This systemized governance hints at a sophisticated understanding of statecraft. But what was life like for ordinary people under his rule? Did the empire bring prosperity or oppression? How did Sargon balance the ambitions of conquest with the realities of governing? Curiously, the story of Sargon is punctuated by enigmatic gaps. After his reign, the Akkadian Empire endured challenges: internal strife, external invasions, and ecological changes. Some theories suggest climate shifts contributed to the empire's decline. Could Sargon's empire have been an early victim of environmental forces beyond human control? Beyond history and archaeology, Sargon's figure has inspired numerous speculative theories. Some see him as a prototype of the archetypal ruler, the self-made man rising from obscurity to dominion. Others speculate on lost knowledge or even mythic dimensions in his story. What layers of truth and myth intertwine in his legacy? Sargon's impact resonates beyond Mesopotamia, influencing later empires and cultural memory. The very concept of empire, centralized authority, and bureaucratic governance trace their roots to his reign. Yet, how much of the man himself remains hidden beneath centuries of narrative and myth? As we delve into the life and times of Sargon the Great, we confront the mysteries of power, identity, and history. How does a single individual alter the course of civilizations? And what fragments of his true story await discovery, concealed in forgotten texts or buried beneath ancient sands? The legacy of Sargon is not merely that of a conqueror, but a symbol of human ambition reaching beyond borders, of the fragile and complex nature of empire. What truths does his story hold for us today? And what questions linger in the echoes of his forgotten capital? The sands of time may have shifted, but the enigma of Sargon the Great endures, inviting us to look deeper, question more, and wonder what remains hidden, waiting to be uncovered. From the towering ziggurats that pierce the skies to the labyrinthine courts of Mesopotamian cities, the ancient world often evokes images of kings, warriors, and gods. Yet, woven quietly through this grand tapestry are the stories of women whose power shaped religion, governance, and knowledge, priestesses, queens, and scholars who wielded influence both visible and veiled. As we move beyond the shadow of empire and myth, their voices invite us to reconsider the very foundations of Mesopotamian civilization. Imagine a temple at dawn, the scent of incense thick in the air, where a priestess prepares for rituals that connect mortals to the divine. These women were not mere attendants, but vital conduits between heaven and earth. The role of priestesses in Mesopotamia was complex and multifaceted. Entrusted with sacred rites, they interpreted divine will, maintained temples, and managed vast economic resources. How did these women acquire such spiritual authority in a society often perceived as patriarchal? And what was their true scope of power behind temple walls? Evidence from cuneiform tablets reveals that some priestesses came from elite families, but others rose through merit, their wisdom respected across social strata. The renowned Enheduanna, high priestess of the moon god Nana in the city of Ur, stands as a remarkable figure, credited as one of the earliest known authors in history. Through her hymns and prayers, she not only shaped religious thought, but also wielded political influence. How much of her voice remains lost, obscured by time and translation? What deeper insights into the spiritual and political life of Mesopotamia might her writings yet reveal? The queenly figures of Mesopotamia offer another intriguing dimension. Unlike later monarchies dominated strictly by men, some ancient Mesopotamian queens exercised tangible political power. Titles like Nin or En, often translated simply as lady, could denote a ruler or regent in her own right. The Queen Puabi, whose elaborate tomb was unearthed at Ur, adorned with jewelry and symbols of status, reflects a woman of immense influence and wealth. But what were the actual responsibilities and limits of queenship in a male-dominated hierarchy? Did queens act as co-rulers, power brokers, or symbolic figures? More speculative theories emerge when we examine how these women's roles intersected with mystery cults, secret knowledge, or esoteric traditions. Some scholars suggest that priestesses might have served as keepers of forbidden wisdom or guardians of celestial knowledge, linking the earthly realm with the stars. Could the ancient narratives of divine femininity and cosmic balance hint at a hidden lineage of female intellectual and spiritual authority? Additionally, archaeological evidence points toward women's involvement in scholarly pursuits, from scribal schools to medicine. While literacy and scholarship were predominantly male domains, the presence of learned women challenges assumptions about gender roles in Mesopotamia. How widespread was female literacy? Did women contribute to scientific and literary traditions in ways we have yet to fully uncover? The social status of these women, however, was not uniform. Many priestesses and queens operated within tightly controlled frameworks, their power often circumscribed by male relatives or religious institutions. Yet, their legacies survive in myths, inscriptions, and artifacts, echoes of agency and autonomy amidst broader patriarchal structures. Furthermore, the blending of historical record and myth complicates our understanding, where figures like Inanna, goddess of love and war, reflections of real women's power or symbolic archetypes. How did divine femininity inform and reflect women's earthly roles? As we sift through fragments, texts, tombs, temple walls, we encounter tantalizing questions rather than definitive answers. How many stories have been lost, buried beneath layers of stone and time? What hidden archives might still illuminate the complexities of female power in Mesopotamia? The women of power in ancient Mesopotamia invite us into a realm where religion, politics, and intellect converged, a realm not solely defined by kings and gods, but shaped profoundly by those who often remain at the margins of history. Their mysteries challenge us to look beyond traditional narratives and to wonder what truths lie still concealed in the ruins and relics. What deeper wisdom might these women have preserved? What secrets of power, faith, and knowledge remain waiting beneath the sands? The story of Mesopotamia is not complete without their voices, resonating faintly through time, inviting us to listen more closely and to keep searching. From the solemn halls of ancient Mesopotamian courts to the rugged streets of bustling city-states, justice was meted out with a precision and severity that still echoes through the ages. The Code of Hammurabi, etched into stone with painstaking care, stands as one of humanity's earliest comprehensive legal systems. But within its weathered lines lie punishments that confound modern sensibilities, harsh, exacting, sometimes bewilderingly severe. What can these ancient laws tell us about the society that created them? And what mysteries linger beneath their rigid decrees? The basalt stele bearing Hammurabi's laws rises nearly 7 feet tall, its surface etched with hundreds of rules governing everything from trade and marriage to theft and assault. At the top, a relief depicts Hammurabi himself receiving divine authority from Shamash, the sun god and arbiter of justice. This image sets the tone. Law as divine mandate, justice as order from the heavens. Among the laws are punishments that today feel bizarre, even brutal. The principle of lex talionis, an eye for an eye, dominates the code. Theft might be punished by cutting off a hand. Negligence causing injury could mean maiming or death. But the logic behind these measures was more complex than mere retribution. Were these punishments designed to deter crime, enforce social hierarchy, or maintain cosmic balance? Some laws prescribe specific penalties depending on social status, distinguishing between nobles, commoners, and slaves. How did this stratification shape notions of justice? Did the harshness reflect a practical need to control a diverse and expanding population, or something deeper about Mesopotamian values? Beyond the physical punishments, the code reveals unusual penalties that blend legal and religious elements. For instance, certain offenses call for ritual purification or exile, punishments that suggest crime was also an affront to divine order. How did these spiritual consequences influence societal behavior? And what role did fear of the gods play alongside fear of earthly punishment? Yet, even as the Code of Hammurabi is well documented, it raises questions. How uniformly were these laws enforced across Mesopotamia's varied city-states and over time? Archaeological records hint that in practice, judgments could vary widely. Was the code more of an ideal, a model for justice, than a rigid rulebook? Curiously, some laws seem strangely specific, addressing scenarios so detailed they imply a complex and nuanced society. One law governs how to deal with a runaway slave, another prescribes penalties for injuring a pregnant woman. What do these details reveal about daily life, power dynamics, and social anxieties? Speculation extends even further. Some suggest the code's severity served not only as justice, but as spectacle, public punishments that reinforced authority and deterred dissent. Others propose that such harshness reflects a worldview in which disorder threatened not only individuals, but the very stability of society and the cosmos. Could the code itself be read as a ritual text, binding human behavior to divine law? The stele's survival through millennia offers a rare window into ancient governance, yet it also invites mystery. Was Hammurabi truly the sole author? Or did he codify pre-existing laws? How much did earlier legal traditions influence his code, and how did his laws shape those that followed across civilizations? Moreover, the translation and interpretation of cuneiform texts remain a complex and evolving field. Are there nuances lost in language or context that modern scholars have yet to grasp? Could some laws have metaphorical meanings or symbolic functions we overlook? As we examine the bizarre punishments etched in stone, we confront a civilization's attempt to balance justice, order, and morality in a world both familiar and alien. What lessons did the Mesopotamians draw from this balance? And what remains hidden beneath the surface of these ancient decrees? Could some of these laws hint at fears or beliefs now long forgotten? What truths about justice and power might still be buried in clay tablets waiting to be discovered? In the quiet shadows of Hammurabi's code, the line between law and legend blurs, inviting us to ponder the depths of human order, the nature of punishment, and the mysteries of an ancient world where justice was carved in stone yet never fully revealed. The sprawling city of Babylon once rose like a jeweled crown upon the flat plains of Mesopotamia, its walls stretching endlessly, enclosing a world of shimmering temples, bustling markets, and lush gardens that defied the arid land. At the height of its glory, Babylon was a beacon of civilization, powerful, magnificent, and enigmatic. Central to this grandeur was Nebuchadnezzar II, the king whose name has been etched into history as a builder, conqueror, and a figure shrouded in mystery. Nebuchadnezzar's reign in the 6th century BCE marked a pivotal chapter in Mesopotamian history. His vision transformed Babylon into a marvel of architecture and innovation. The fabled Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, rose from myth and legend as a verdant sanctuary suspended in the air. Massive ziggurats reached toward the heavens, and towering walls protected the city with a strength that seemed impenetrable. But behind these feats of human ingenuity lay questions that persist to this day. Did the Hanging Gardens truly exist, or are they a poetic invention born from travelers' tales and ancient imagination? Where exactly were they located, if at all? Nebuchadnezzar's legacy extends beyond bricks and mortar. His military campaigns expanded Babylon's reach across Mesopotamia and beyond, imposing his will on rival kingdoms and tribes. Inscriptions portray a ruler favored by gods, guided by divine prophecy. Yet history also hints at shadows darker than the shining facade of his capital. One of the most compelling and enduring mysteries surrounding Nebuchadnezzar is the account of his descent into madness, as described in biblical and ancient texts alike. These narratives tell of a king driven to wander the wilderness like an animal, stripped of reason and dignity. Could this tale be a metaphor for political downfall, mental illness, or something more symbolic? What truths lie buried beneath the layers of legend? The archaeological remnants of Babylon offer fragments of insight, but many questions remain unanswered. What was daily life like under Nebuchadnezzar's rule? How did the common people experience his reign, and what did they make of the extravagant projects that defined the city's skyline? The grandeur that captivated so many also demanded immense resources and labor. What price was paid by those who built and lived within those mighty walls? Beyond the historical record, some theories venture into more speculative realms. Was Nebuchadnezzar's reported madness a sign of a neurological disorder, a punishment from the gods, or a political allegory crafted by rivals? Could there be lost records or artifacts waiting to shed light on these mysteries, hidden beneath Babylon's sands? The symbolism surrounding Nebuchadnezzar's reign is equally intriguing. His construction projects, especially the Ishtar Gate adorned with dragons and lions, speak of power and protection, but also carry layers of myth and ritual significance. How did these symbols shape Babylonian identity and worldview? Were they purely political, or did they embody spiritual meanings still elusive to modern understanding? Furthermore, the legacy of Babylon and its king stretches far beyond the ancient world. Through biblical texts, classical writings, and modern archaeology, Nebuchadnezzar has become a figure entwined with themes of pride, fall, and redemption. How much of this narrative reflects historical reality, and how much is interpretation shaped by subsequent cultures and beliefs? As we wander the remnants of Babylon's ruins and listen to the stories whispered by its crumbled walls, the figure of Nebuchadnezzar looms large, majestic, inscrutable, and complex. What secrets did he carry as he ruled one of the ancient world's greatest cities? What mysteries remain concealed in the dust, waiting to be uncovered? The tale of Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon is a mosaic of glory and enigma, a civilization's pinnacle entwined with human frailty. It invites us to reflect on the nature of power, the passage of time, and the elusive truths hidden in the shadows of history. What truths might still emerge from Babylon's silent stones, and how will they reshape our understanding of a king whose story continues to captivate and confound? From the shimmering glint of finely hammered gold to the rough tactile impression left by a sculptor's hand on damp clay, the world of Mesopotamian craftsmen and artisans reveals a dimension of ancient life often overshadowed by kings and conquests. Yet, it is through these masterful creators, goldsmiths, potters, weavers, and sculptors, that the essence of Mesopotamian culture takes tangible form. Their work not only adorned palaces and temples, but also spoke of beliefs, social orders, and the intimate relationship between humans and the divine. In the bustling workshops nestled within the cities of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, artisans labored with a precision that still captivates archaeologists and historians. The gleaming jewelry excavated from royal tombs, intricate necklaces, delicate earrings, and ceremonial headdresses testify to a deep knowledge of metallurgy and design. Each piece, painstakingly fashioned from gold, lapis lazuli, and carnelian, suggests more than mere decoration. These objects may have embodied status, protection, or spiritual significance. How did these artisans acquire such skills? Were their techniques guarded secrets passed down through generations, or did they evolve through experimentation and trade with distant cultures? Clay, abundant along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, served as the medium for another remarkable form of artistry. Tablets inscribed with cuneiform bear witness to the dawn of writing. But alongside these texts are delicate figurines, detailed reliefs, and ceramic vessels that speak silently of everyday life, rituals, and myths. The fingerprints and tool marks on these objects offer an intimate glimpse into the hands that shaped them. But beyond the obvious, Could these creations also carry hidden codes or esoteric meanings lost to time? Were some pieces intended as offerings to gods or as talismans to protect the living from unseen forces? The role of the craftsman was intertwined with the spiritual and political spheres. Many workshops operated under the patronage of temples or palaces, suggesting a system where art was not merely commerce but an extension of religious and royal power. How did this patronage shape the artisans' creativity and the themes they explored? Did they view themselves as mere technicians or as participants in a sacred dialogue between mortals and gods? Intriguingly, some artifacts defy easy explanation. Elaborate jewelry sometimes incorporates designs and symbols that scholars still debate. Are they purely decorative, or do they encode knowledge of astronomy, cosmology, or secret societies? Similarly, certain pottery and sculptures exhibit styles and motifs that seem to blend local traditions with influences from far-flung regions. How far did Mesopotamian artisans travel, or how extensive were their trade networks? Could there have been cultural exchanges that shaped these artistic innovations in ways we have yet to fully understand? Craftsmanship in Mesopotamia also raises questions about the social status of artisans themselves. Were they revered for their skills or regarded as mere laborers? Did their guilds or families hold power within the city-states? Evidence points to a complex social fabric, but many details remain elusive. What personal stories are buried beneath layers of clay and gold? Beyond the physical artifacts, the methods used by Mesopotamian craftsmen remain a source of fascination. How were metals smelted and alloys created in a time before modern technology? What tools enabled such fine detail work in stone and clay? Experimental archaeology has shed some light, but many processes are still partially speculative. Were there lost techniques, perhaps tied to ritual knowledge, that vanished with the fall of ancient cities? Even the notion of artistic inspiration in Mesopotamia invites reflection. Did artisans draw purely from their surroundings and patrons' demands, or did they tap into visions, dreams, or divine guidance? Some texts hint at craftsmen as seers or ritual specialists. Could their creations have been conceived as more than aesthetic objects, but as vessels of cosmic meaning? As we trace the delicate contours of Mesopotamian art and craftsmanship, the boundary between practical skill and profound mystery blurs. What secrets might the silent objects whisper if we could listen closely? Could new discoveries one day reveal hidden dimensions of this ancient artistry, dimensions that deepen our understanding of the people who shaped the earliest chapters of civilization? The masters of gold and clay crafted more than beauty. They forged links between past and present, human and divine, known and unknown. Their legacy invites us to ponder what remains buried beneath centuries of dust, waiting for patient hands and curious minds to uncover stories yet untold. Rising from the dusty plains of ancient Mesopotamia, the ziggurat stands as a silent monument to human ambition and divine aspiration. These massive, stepped towers, layer upon layer of baked bricks and sun-dried clay, reach toward the heavens, their imposing forms dominating city skylines like stairways to the gods. In places like Ur, Eridu, and Babylon, these sacred structures were more than mere architectural feats. They were the spiritual centers of their communities, the earthly anchors connecting mortals with the cosmic forces above. The term ziggurat itself evokes mystery, a word born from the Akkadian language, yet the origins and purposes of these colossal towers reach far deeper into the ancient mind. Built between roughly 3000 and 500 BCE, ziggurats served as temples, platforms for rituals, and symbolic mountains where priests and kings might commune with divine beings. But how did these structures come to embody such significance? What inspired the early builders to conceive a vertical ascent, a towering presence, in a landscape otherwise flat and open? At their core, Ziggurats were constructed with practical ingenuity. Layers of mud brick walls enclosed solid cores, their surfaces often glazed in vivid colors or adorned with reliefs depicting gods and mythic scenes. Some scholars see the multi-tiered design as a reflection of Mesopotamian cosmology, a microcosm of the universe itself, with the earth, heavens, and underworld stacked one atop the other. Did the Ziggurats' height symbolize an axis mundi, a cosmic pillar connecting disparate realms? Was the ascent to the summit a metaphor for spiritual elevation, or a literal path for divine emissaries to descend and ascend? Yet, as with many ancient wonders, Ziggurats hold secrets that elude definitive explanation. While we understand their role in worship and governance, the rituals conducted atop these platforms remain largely speculative. Did priests perform ceremonies visible to the populace below, or were these sacred rites hidden from ordinary eyes? Could the very design of these towers, each step, each chamber, have encoded astronomical knowledge, aligning with stars or celestial cycles that guided Mesopotamian calendars and divination? The mystery deepens when considering the scale and resources devoted to their construction. Raising a ziggurat required vast labor, coordination, and materials, implying a society deeply invested in this spiritual architecture. Was this investment purely religious, or did it also serve political ends, consolidating the ruler's power by demonstrating control over both the divine and the earthly? Could these monuments have functioned as early forms of social cohesion or propaganda, inspiring awe and obedience through their sheer presence? Explorations of ziggurat ruins reveal not only architectural complexity, but also symbolic layering. Some theories propose that beneath the visible structure lie subterranean chambers or secret passageways, potentially used for initiation rituals or hidden rites. Could these hidden spaces offer clues to a lost dimension of Mesopotamian spirituality, one that balanced public spectacle with private mystery? The relationship between ziggurats and water also invites inquiry. Situated near the fertile rivers that birthed Mesopotamian civilization, the towers stood in stark contrast to the ever-changing floodplains below. Were ziggurats intended to transcend the fragility of earthly life, serving as eternal monuments above a landscape shaped and reshaped by the unpredictable waters? Or might they have had a role in ritual purification, rain invocation, or other interactions with natural forces? In addition to their religious significance, ziggurats sparked technological and artistic innovation. The mastery of brickmaking, waterproofing techniques, and large-scale construction in a pre-industrial age remains remarkable. Yet some details still puzzle experts. How precisely did the builders solve the engineering challenges of stability and longevity? How were these monumental projects coordinated within societies that lacked modern tools and machinery? Ziggurats also resonate with echoes beyond Mesopotamia, inspiring architectural forms in later cultures and religious traditions. What does this architectural legacy reveal about the human impulse to reach upward, to bridge the earthly and the divine? Do these ancient towers hint at universal spiritual concepts, or are they unique expressions shaped by the Mesopotamian environment and worldview? Even the spiritual beings believed to inhabit these sacred spaces remain shrouded in enigma. Which gods were most closely associated with ziggurats, and how did their worship shape the experience of these towering temples? Were the ziggurats seen as literal homes of the gods, or more as symbolic centers where divine presence could be invoked? As twilight falls over the ruins of Ur and Babylon, the ziggurats stand quietly against the vast sky, monuments to faith, power, and mystery. Their layered terraces invite us to ponder not only the engineering marvels of ancient builders, but also the profound human desire to touch the divine, to create lasting connections between earth and sky. What stories remain sealed within these ancient bricks? What unseen forces shaped their form and function? The Ziggurats' ascent continues, not just in stone, but in our collective quest to understand a civilization that reached so far beyond its time, seeking answers still whispered by the winds across the Mesopotamian plain. From the ancient whispers of travelers to the grand chronicles of historians, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon have captivated imaginations for millennia. Described as a verdant paradise suspended above the dusty streets of an arid city, this wonder is said to have been a breathtaking spectacle of lush greenery, cascading vines, and exotic blossoms, a miracle of engineering and nature intertwined. Yet as we peer back through the haze of time, the question remains: was the Hanging Gardens a tangible marvel of ancient ingenuity, or merely a poetic myth woven into the fabric of Babylonian legend? Our journey begins with the sparse and tantalizing written records. The earliest mentions come not from Babylon itself, but from Greek historians such as Berossus, Strabo, and later Pliny the Elder. Their accounts paint an image of terraces rising high above the Euphrates, irrigated by a mysterious system that lifted water from the river to nourish the luxuriant foliage. Yet Babylonian cuneiform texts, remarkably detailed in other respects, remain silent on the existence of these gardens. How can such an extraordinary feat escape the notice of local scribes, who chronicled everything from royal decrees to temple inventories? Archaeology offers fragments of clues but no definitive proof. Excavations in Babylon have revealed grand palaces and intricate irrigation channels, hinting at advanced hydraulic technology. Could such infrastructure have supported the elaborate irrigation system described in classical accounts? Some scholars suggest that nearby sites, such as the city of Nineveh, with its own remarkable gardens documented in Assyrian reliefs, might have inspired or been conflated with the Babylonian gardens over time. Could the famous hanging aspect itself be a mistranslation or embellishment, perhaps referring to terraced gardens or lush rooftop spaces rather than literal suspension in midair? The mystery deepens as we consider the engineering challenges involved. How might ancient builders have lifted vast quantities of water high enough to sustain a multi-level garden in a region known for its dry climate? Theories range from screw pumps, known later as Archimedean screws, to chain and bucket systems, though the evidence for such technologies in Babylonian times remains debated. Could these ingenious methods have existed but vanished without trace? Or might the gardens have been more modest than legend suggests, their grandeur amplified by centuries of storytelling? Speculation has also turned to the very nature and purpose of the gardens. Were they a royal pleasure ground, created by Nebuchadnezzar II for his queen to remind her of the mountainous homeland of Media? Or might they have had religious or symbolic significance, embodying the cosmic mountain connecting earth and heavens, much like the Ziggurats? The lush greenery in a desert city might itself have been a metaphor for life, fertility, and divine favor, an earthly paradise reflecting heavenly abundance. Could the gardens have been more than physical spaces, perhaps a poetic ideal that inspired awe and hope? Interestingly, some recent hypotheses propose the Hanging Gardens were not in Babylon at all. A controversial theory points to a palace in Nineveh, where detailed reliefs depict extensive gardens and sophisticated waterworks. Could ancient historians have confused or merged stories from different cities? If so, what does this tell us about the transmission of history and myth in the ancient world? How did cultural memory reshape these tales, mixing fact with imagination? Moreover, the garden's fate remains shrouded in uncertainty. Earthquakes, invasions, and centuries of neglect would have erased many traces. Was the disappearance of the gardens literal, a loss to time and nature? Or did the stories fade as Babylon itself declined? And if they existed, what secrets might still lie buried beneath the sands, waiting for future explorers to uncover. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon stand at the crossroads of history and myth, engineering and poetry, fact and legend. They invite us to reflect on the human desire to create beauty against the odds, to defy nature's harshness with artifice and imagination. Are they a testament to ancient technological genius or a dream suspended in time, a symbol rather than a structure? As we let this mystery linger, the garden's lush terraces may remain forever out of reach, yet their allure continues to blossom in the fertile soil of curiosity. What truths lie hidden in the shifting layers of history? And how many wonders, like the gardens themselves, await rediscovery beneath the shifting sands of Mesopotamia? As the story of Babylon's grandeur fades into the distance, our gaze turns to the quieter, often overlooked corners of ancient Mesopotamia, places where the echoes of human life have settled into silence, their stories buried beneath layers of sand and time. Among these are the lost cities of Larsa and Eridu, once thriving centers of civilization, now enigmatic ruins that whisper tantalizing fragments of a forgotten world. Larsa, nestled near the banks of the Euphrates, was a city of commerce, faith, and political intrigue. In its heyday, Larsa served as a critical hub for trade and religious devotion, its temples dedicated to the sun god Utu, illuminating both the spiritual and daily lives of its inhabitants. Archaeological digs have uncovered towering ziggurats and vast archives of cuneiform tablets, records of laws, commerce, and cosmic events. Yet, despite this wealth of information, many questions remain. What precise role did Larsa play in the shifting power dynamics of southern Mesopotamia? Why did it rise and fall with such suddenness, eclipsed by its neighbors? And what secrets do the fragmented tablets, many still undeciphered, hold about the beliefs and practices of its people? Even more elusive is Eridu, often regarded by scholars as one of the oldest cities in the world. Situated on the edge of what was once the Persian Gulf, Eridu occupies a liminal space between myth and history. According to Sumerian tradition, it was the first city ever founded, created by the gods themselves as the cradle of civilization. Its ancient temple, the Abzu, dedicated to Enki, god of water and wisdom, was believed to connect the earth to the primordial waters beneath. Excavations reveal a series of temple rebuildings layered over millennia, suggesting a continuous reverence that survived through generations. But why was Eridu eventually abandoned, sinking into obscurity? Did environmental changes, shifting river courses, or human conflict seal its fate? And what of the legends that surround it? Do they hint at truths lost to history, or merely poetic reflections of cultural memory? The mystery of these lost cities deepens as we consider their relation to the broader Mesopotamian landscape. What was the nature of their interaction with great urban centers like Ur and Babylon? Were they autonomous states, satellite towns, or spiritual waypoints in a network that shaped early civilization? Intriguingly, recent satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar have revealed buried structures in roadways that challenge traditional maps, suggesting a complexity and scale previously unimagined. Could these findings rewrite our understanding of Mesopotamian urban development? How many other settlements, small towns, fortresses, sacred sites, remain hidden beneath the shifting sands? Moreover, the environmental context of Larsa and Eridu offers fertile ground for speculation. Both cities thrived along rivers that have since changed course or dried up. How did these shifts in waterways affect their prosperity and decline? Was their abandonment a slow fading or sudden collapse? Some scholars hypothesize that changes in climate, salinization of the soil, or natural disasters played a pivotal role. Could Eridu, often linked with the Abzu, the watery abyss, represent a deeper cultural memory of rising sea levels or catastrophic floods? How might these environmental transformations have shaped the myths and spiritual outlook of Mesopotamian peoples? The enigmatic ruins of Larsa and Eridu also raise questions about the social and religious fabric of their inhabitants. What rituals and beliefs sustained these cities? How did the interplay between kingship, priesthood, and commoners manifest in daily life? Tablets and artifacts hint at complex administrative systems and devotional practices, yet much remains fragmentary. Are there lost stories, oral traditions, or sacred texts buried alongside the clay bricks, waiting for discovery? And how do these lost voices challenge our modern interpretations of Mesopotamian culture? Intriguingly, the concept of lost cities extends beyond mere archaeological sites. It encompasses the idea of civilizations lost not only to physical decay, but to shifting cultural memories and narratives. How do modern perceptions shape the way we reconstruct these ancient places? What biases or gaps in the historical record influence our understanding? And could new interdisciplinary approaches, combining archaeology, geology, linguistics, and even folklore, unlock dimensions of these cities that remain elusive? As the sun sets over the vast plains where Larsa and Eridu once flourished, the ruins stand as silent sentinels, markers of human ambition, faith, and fragility. They remind us that beneath every ancient mound lies a tapestry of stories, some told, many untold, and countless lost to time's relentless passage. What else lies beneath these forgotten realms? What truths about the dawn of civilization remain hidden beneath layers of earth and myth? And how might future discoveries transform not only our knowledge of Mesopotamia, but our understanding of humanity's earliest steps into history? The journey into these lost cities continues, inviting us to listen closely to the whispers of a vanished world still waiting to be heard. As the dust settles from the vanished cities of Larsa and Eridu, our journey carries us to a place where the scattered voices of Mesopotamia's past converge, a sanctuary of knowledge, power, and mystery, the Library of Ashurbanipal. Situated within the sprawling palace complex at Nineveh, this ancient archive is more than a mere collection of clay tablets. It is a testament to a civilization's desire to preserve, understand, and perhaps even control the vast currents of history and myth flowing through their world. Imagine walking through towering halls lined with shelves, each carefully stacked with thousands of tablets, baked clay inscribed with wedge-shaped characters that chronicle everything from royal decrees to epic poetry, from astronomical observations to incantations and omens. This was not just a library in the modern sense. It was a repository of culture and memory, painstakingly assembled under the reign of Ashurbanipal, one of Assyria's most powerful kings. His ambition was clear: to gather the wisdom of the known world, to guard it from oblivion, and to wield it as a tool of imperial dominance. The tablets themselves offer a vivid window into Mesopotamian life, revealing insights into religion, science, law, and literature. Among them lies the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest surviving great literary work, alongside detailed medical texts, astronomical charts, and bureaucratic records. But even as these texts provide clarity, they also deepen the mystery. How were these vast collections organized and maintained in an era before paper or printing? How accessible were these texts beyond the elite scribes and priests? And what knowledge might have been deliberately excluded or altered to serve political or religious agendas? Excavations in the mid-19th century uncovered this treasure trove, igniting a revolution in our understanding of the ancient Near East. Yet despite thousands of tablets recovered, much remains untranslated, broken, or lost to the ravages of time. Could there be undiscovered caches buried beneath the ruins of Nineveh, waiting to rewrite chapters of history we thought we knew? And what of the tablets damaged by fire or war? Do they hint at conflicts not just physical but intellectual, struggles over whose version of truth would endure? More enigmatic still are the speculative theories surrounding the library's purpose and origin. Some scholars propose that beyond its practical role, the library functioned as a symbolic bastion against chaos, an attempt to impose order on the world through the codification of knowledge. Might Ashurbanipal's collection have been influenced by ancient beliefs in the power of written words to capture and harness divine forces? Could the library itself be seen as a magical artifact, a sealed vault of secrets protecting cosmic wisdom? Adding to this aura are intriguing tales about the scribes and scholars who tended the archive. Were they mere record keepers, or guardians of esoteric knowledge passed down through secret traditions? Did they understand the full depth of the texts they copied, or were some scripts already mysterious and cryptic in their own time? And what of the mysterious catalogs? Lists of texts that suggest even larger libraries existed elsewhere, now lost to history. Could there have been a network of knowledge centers across Mesopotamia, interlinked by scribal traditions and exchanges that shaped the intellectual landscape of the ancient world? The very existence of the Library of Ashurbanipal challenges modern assumptions about ancient civilizations and their capacity for record-keeping, scholarship, and self-reflection. How did the Mesopotamians perceive the act of writing and preserving? Was the library a final fortress of cultural memory amid political upheaval, or part of a broader tradition of knowledge that stretched back into prehistory? And what lessons might these ancient custodians of wisdom hold for us today, in a world saturated with information yet still searching for meaning? As we sift through the echoes of clay and cuneiform, the library emerges not only as a physical site, but as a symbol, a reminder that history is as much about what is preserved as what is lost. What stories have slipped through the cracks, never to be inscribed or saved? What secrets might future discoveries reveal, hidden beneath the shifting sands or within yet untranslated tablets? The Library of Ashurbanipal stands at the intersection of memory, myth, and mystery, a silent archive that invites us to ponder the vastness of human knowledge and the fragile threads by which it is transmitted through time. What else lies concealed within its ancient walls, waiting patiently for the light of understanding to reach it? The answers remain elusive, yet the quest continues. As we emerge from the shadowy vaults of Ashurbanipal's great library, our eyes adjust to a quieter revelation, one not gilded in grandeur, but shaped by hands, dried in sunlight, and etched with reeds. These are the clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia, humble in form, yet immense in significance. Not scrolls of papyrus, nor parchment delicately rolled, just raw earth, hardened and marked with wedge-shaped impressions. Yet from these fragments, entire worlds speak. Across the floodplains of the Tigris and Euphrates, these tablets were the lifeblood of Mesopotamian civilization. Thousands have survived, tucked in temple storerooms, sealed in administrative archives, buried under ruined ziggurats. They are records of life, of death, of taxes and rituals, of kings and gods. Some whisper the secrets of star positions, while others capture the mundane details of a barley shipment or a marriage contract. Together, they form a network, a web of human thought and intention stretching across centuries. The clay tablet was more than a tool. It was a medium of memory. In the hands of scribes, it became a conduit for law, prophecy, science, and story. In a way not unlike our digital age, information could be copied, transmitted, stored, and retrieved. In schools, young scribes memorized set texts, reciting and reproducing tablets word for word, an early form of data replication. In temples, archives grew vast, some categorized with surprisingly modern efficiency. One might pause to ask, was this not, in its own form, the first information age? And in this intricate system of recording, were there deeper patterns? Could these scattered tablets, many still untranslated, some purposefully buried, hold connections we have yet to perceive? Might there be an algorithm of myth and record, coded in the repetition of signs and symbols? Some researchers have suggested that scribes did not merely document events, they shaped them. The act of writing conferred legitimacy, even reality. A boundary marked on a tablet became a boundary in the land. A decree written in cuneiform took on the weight of divine law. This raises a question. Were the tablets tools of administration or instruments of power? In some ways, they did what modern information systems do. They centralized authority, preserved dogma, and enabled the wide reach of institutions. Literacy was tightly controlled. Writing was the domain of trained scribes, often affiliated with temples. What was permitted to be written, and what was not, may have reflected a controlled narrative of the world. Might there have been knowledge too dangerous, too sacred, or too politically volatile to ever be inscribed? Some tantalizing clues hint at this possibility. In rare cases, tablets reference writings now lost, the tablets of the heavens, books of the seven sages, or even the secrets of the gods. Are these poetic flourishes, or references to hidden libraries, ritual texts kept apart from public knowledge? And what of the broken or defaced tablets, their inscriptions deliberately obliterated? Could this suggest a kind of censorship, a desire to erase certain truths from history? Consider the transmission of myth, how the same stories appear across centuries, reshaped and adapted. The Epic of Gilgamesh, preserved on clay, echoes earlier Sumerian tales. But versions differ. Some tablets include lines others omit. Characters change subtly. Could this variance reflect an evolving narrative, intentionally adapted to suit new rulers, new ideologies? Or were scribes working from oral traditions, inscribing what they remembered or were told? In this way, even the same story becomes a kind of palimpsest, a layering of voices, a dialogue across time. One cannot help but marvel at the parallels between these ancient methods of information sharing and our own. Just as we store knowledge in digital clouds, the Mesopotamians stored theirs in temple vaults. Just as our data networks form complex webs of association, so too did their tablets, cross-referenced, duplicated, and sent between cities. Trade agreements signed in Ur turned up in Mari. Omens observed in Nippur were copied in Babylon. It is tempting to imagine a sprawling mesh of knowledge, a clay-born internet spanning a cradle of civilization. And yet, the comparison can only go so far. Unlike digital files, these tablets bear the mark of the hand that made them. Each wedge pressed into soft clay was a moment of intention, a living gesture. They are not only records, they are artifacts of presence, physical reminders that behind every system, no matter how vast, there were people. And that, perhaps, is where their deepest mystery lies. Even today, only a fraction of the known tablets have been translated. Tens of thousands rest in museum vaults, awaiting interpretation. What might still lie encoded in those signs? A new poem, a forgotten prophecy, a treaty that alters our understanding of a war, a discovery of stars unseen. Could it be that within the baked earth, pieces of human history, once thought lost, remain, silent but not extinguished? As we trace our fingers over these ancient texts, their cuneiform grooves filled with time and silence, we are reminded of the fragility and persistence of memory. What else have we yet to find? And what stories, etched in clay thousands of years ago, are still waiting to reach us? Through translation, through imagination, through rediscovery. In the end, the clay tablets of Mesopotamia are more than relics. They are messages across millennia. And as we continue to unearth them, the question quietly lingers. Have we truly deciphered what they were trying to tell us, or have we only just begun to listen? As the clay crumbles under the archaeologist's brush and another tablet sees the light of day for the first time in millennia, we step back into the silence of the ancient South, into Sumer, the birthplace of cities, writing, and kingship. What was once a fertile cradle of innovation and ritual now lies fragmented beneath layers of time and dust. Towering ziggurats eroded into low mounds, canals run dry, temples forgotten. It is easy to imagine that this world was meant to endure, and yet it did not. The question haunts scholars and seekers alike. What brought down Sumer, the world's first civilization? At its height, Sumer was a patchwork of vibrant city-states: Ur, Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, Nippur, each with its own patron deity, each locked in cycles of alliance and rivalry. These cities rose from marshy deltas between the Tigris and Euphrates, woven together by irrigation canals and trade routes. They gave us the first bureaucrats, the first laws, and the first epics. Their scribes inscribed contracts and prayers in cuneiform. Their astronomers watched the heavens. But sometime after 2000 BCE, these urban lights began to flicker out. The reasons, it seems, are complex. Historians cite warfare. Records speak of invasions from the northwest. Foreign names like the Gutians appear, often described as chaotic outsiders who swept into Sumerian lands, dismantling political order and undermining temple authority. Yet these accounts, written by later dynasties, carry a tone of disdain and myth. Were the Gutians truly a destructive force? Or did they simply inherit a system already in decline? Other clues point to environmental stress. Sediment cores and climatological data suggest a gradual drying of the region. A long drought that may have desiccated crops and strained the sophisticated irrigation networks. Without reliable harvests, trade faltered. Cities turned inward. Social cohesion frayed. Was it climate that doomed Sumer, nature asserting its will over human endeavor? There are signs, too, of overreach. Some scholars argue that Sumer's greatest strength, its agricultural engineering, may also have sealed its fate. Poor drainage and over-irrigation likely caused salt to accumulate in the soil. Over time, the land that had once yielded abundant barley turned barren. Harvest yields dropped. Temple economies suffered. As food supplies dwindled, so too did the power of the priest-kings who claimed divine favor. And yet, despite this slow unraveling, Sumer did not vanish overnight. Its culture and language persisted, absorbed into the Akkadian Empire and later Babylonian realms. Sumerian remained a sacred tongue, spoken in ritual long after it ceased to be anyone's native language. Its influence echoed in law, literature, and cosmology. But the cities themselves, many of them, emptied. Why? Was it a perfect storm of factors? Drought, salinization, political collapse, foreign incursion? Or could there be more subtle forces at work? Some theories drift toward the speculative. Ancient texts speak of omens and portents, stars that moved strangely, floods that did not recede, voices of gods that grew silent. Were these poetic reflections of a people losing control over their world? Or were they describing real celestial or geological phenomena? A meteorite? A massive shift in river courses? Could the gods' silence be the echo of an astronomical event that disrupted the rhythms of agriculture and ritual? Others look inward to the human psyche. Did the Sumerians reach the limits of complexity too early? Did their centralized systems, temple-run economies, bureaucratic land management, tightly controlled religious hierarchies, become brittle and unresponsive to change? History often shows that when systems grow too intricate, too dependent on balance, Even a small disruption can trigger a cascade of failure. Then there are the persistent whispers of forgotten technologies or lost knowledge. Some fringe theorists wonder if ancient Mesopotamians possessed a deeper understanding of hydraulics, astronomy, or even magnetism, systems not recorded on surviving tablets, but perhaps passed through oral traditions or deliberately kept secret. Could the collapse of Sumer have coincided with the loss of a specialized knowledge class? Scribes, engineers, temple astronomers, cut off by war or displacement? There is little physical evidence to support these more exotic ideas. And yet, the very absence of complete records leaves room for open-ended inquiry. When entire libraries may remain buried, when whole cities are known only by name, can we claim to understand the full picture? Perhaps the most haunting detail is that the Sumerians themselves seemed to anticipate their own decline. In the poetic lament for Ur, an anonymous voice cries out over the city's fall, its temples desecrated, its people scattered. The people mourn. The gods have abandoned us. The storms have swept the land, and the house of the gods is silent. These laments are not chronicles of conquest. They are elegies, songs of sorrow for a world unraveling. Did the priests sense their power slipping? Did the common people watch the rivers change and wonder if the gods were displeased, or if the old rituals simply no longer worked? In the end, the fall of Sumer is not a single event, but a slow ebbing, a twilight of stone and clay, of voices fading into silence. And like many endings in history, it leaves behind more questions than answers. Did Sumer fall, or was it transformed? What remains hidden beneath the ruins of Ur or the unexcavated depths of Eridu? Could the answers be waiting, etched in clay, encoded in layers of soil, or buried beneath layers of human forgetting? The first cities rose like stars in the night, shining bright against the horizon of history, and one by one those lights dimmed. But their reflections still shimmer faintly in myths, in language, in the very idea of civilization. And so we ask, not just what brought Sumer down, but what still remains of it, alive, quiet, just below the surface. As the echoes of Sumer's fall still linger in the silence of forgotten ziggurats, the story presses forward into a wider, more volatile chapter of ancient history, a time when the lights went out across nearly the entire known world. It is the 12th century BCE. Across the eastern Mediterranean and Mesopotamian sphere, cities that had stood for centuries, Ugarit, Mycenae, Hattusa, and countless others, begin to crumble. Trade networks vanish, scripts are lost, entire empires disappear from the map. And what is perhaps most disquieting, it all happens in less than a century. This is the Bronze Age collapse, and it remains one of the greatest enigmas in world history. At first glance, the evidence is straightforward. Cities burned, palaces abandoned, economies fractured. Linear B, the script of the Mycenaean Greeks, simply vanishes. Hittite records cease. Egyptian correspondence grows increasingly desperate as pharaohs plead for grain, aid, and alliances. And in Mesopotamia, the Assyrian and Babylonian realms contract inward, shielding themselves from the chaos on every frontier. But the deeper we look, the murkier the picture becomes. One widely accepted explanation is invasion, particularly by the mysterious Sea Peoples, whose name appears in Egyptian texts from the reign of Ramesses III. These groups, described as warriors from across the sea, attacked Egypt's shores with ships and iron weapons, forcing the empire into costly defensive campaigns. But who were they? A single coalition? Displaced refugees? Mercenaries? Pirates? The records don't say. No homeland is named. No cultural markers survive. Then there's the evidence of internal collapse. Some archaeologists point to economic overextension. In the late Bronze Age, cities were interconnected through complex trade routes. Tin from Afghanistan, copper from Cyprus, ivory from Africa, and luxury goods from the Levant crisscrossed a tightly woven system of exchange. When any link faltered, through war, famine, or piracy, the entire web began to unravel. Could the collapse have been a chain reaction? One kingdom falls, and its neighbors, dependent on that flow of materials and tribute, follow shortly after? If so, which domino fell first? And why? Drought, too, leaves its fingerprints. Core samples from lake beds and sediment across the region suggest a sharp, sustained drying trend during this time. Crops failed. Pastures turned to dust. With food scarce, people would have migrated, some peacefully, others by force. The pressure on urban centers would have grown unbearable. Famine breeds unrest, and unrest feeds rebellion. Some researchers even note that major centers show signs of revolt from within, not just invasion from without. In some cities, elite quarters are burned while poorer districts remain untouched. Is this evidence of class warfare? Of disenfranchised workers and farmers rising up against palace bureaucrats and priesthoods? But even these explanations don't fully account for the scale of destruction. Why were written languages lost? Why were skills like shipbuilding, stone masonry, and monumental architecture forgotten for centuries? Why did literacy vanish so suddenly in so many places? This is where the theories begin to drift, gently, cautiously, into more speculative waters. Some suggest a systemic cybernetic failure, the loss not of tools or weapons, but of knowledge systems themselves. When scribes died or fled, and libraries burned, much more than stories was lost. Administration, mathematics, astronomy, engineering. Without centralized bureaucracies to manage irrigation, food distribution, and calendars, the cities may have simply failed to function. Others wonder about disease. The historical records are thin, but plagues did occur during this period. Could a fast-spreading illness, perhaps moving along trade routes, have decimated populations and crippled governments? We know from later pandemics how easily a society can be brought to its knees, not by swords or drought, but by an invisible hand. And then, there are stranger ideas. Some point to celestial events. Unusual records from Babylonian and Egyptian sources hint at omens in the sky, eclipses, meteors, unseasonal darkness. Could a volcanic eruption, like that of Thera centuries earlier, have contributed to climate shifts or triggered atmospheric disturbances? If a major eruption occurred farther afield, like in Iceland or Central Asia, its effects could still have reached the Levant and Mesopotamia, plunging the skies into dust and the land into drought. Others lean into the more fringe, a suggestion that knowledge was deliberately withheld or erased, that priesthoods or ruling classes, fearing loss of power, may have controlled or destroyed the flow of information, a kind of intellectual sabotage. There is, of course, no direct evidence for this, but the suddenness of the collapse leaves room for unsettling possibilities. And finally, a darker curiosity lingers. Was this simply the end of an age, or the result of a hidden convergence, an alignment of forces not yet fully understood? Could war, drought, plague, rebellion, and migration have collided in a way that magnified each other's effects? A rare historical confluence that overwhelmed the very idea of civilization? One cannot help but wonder, why here? Why then? And why so thoroughly? As we sift through the rubble of lost kingdoms, the silence is almost louder than the ruins. The names of kings, once etched in gold and stone, now survive only as scattered syllables in fragmented texts. And somewhere beneath it all, beneath the theories, the ash, and the sand, there may yet lie a story we've not fully uncovered. Could it be that the Bronze Age collapse is not one mystery, but many, braided together like the rivers that once sustained the world's first empires? What lies beneath this veil of historical amnesia? Were these ancient cities merely victims of fate, or witnesses to something far more intricate, more unsettling, and perhaps more familiar than we'd like to admit? The answers may still rest in the soil, in untranslated tablets, in patterns of trade and climate we've yet to map. And as the night stretches deeper and the fires of old kingdoms flicker out in memory, we are left with only questions, haunting, patient questions, waiting for time or chance to speak once more. As the dust settled from the collapse of the Bronze Age, what remained were not just ruins, but echoes. Echoes that would ripple outward through time, unseen but ever present. The great cities of Sumer and Akkad, the tablets of clay and cuneiform, the myths of kings and gods, all of it seemingly buried beneath centuries of silence. And yet, something lingered. In the fertile crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates, where city walls once gleamed in the rising sun, the spirit of Mesopotamia did not vanish. Though the names changed, Babylon, Nineveh, Assur, the memory of what had been continued to shape what would come next. To understand how, we must start with something deceptively simple. The line. The line, the wedge-shaped marks impressed into soft clay, systematized into what we now call cuneiform, was not merely a writing system. It was a mechanism for memory. For the first time in human history, thoughts were no longer fleeting. Laws could be recorded, contracts preserved, stories told across generations. And with writing came structure, schools for scribes, archives for kings, and the beginnings of historical continuity. From this structure emerged the foundations of civilization: centralized administration, law, trade, and taxation. The Code of Hammurabi, etched in basalt nearly 4,000 years ago, speaks in a voice both alien and eerily familiar. Rulers were no longer just warriors. They were keepers of justice, mediators between the heavens and the earth. But did later civilizations inherit more than laws and ledgers? Did they absorb something less tangible, something embedded in the way Mesopotamians viewed time, order, and the cosmos itself? Ancient Egypt, Persia, Greece, even Rome, each bore the subtle fingerprints of Mesopotamia's legacy. Consider the ziggurat, a stepped tower rising toward the heavens, a sacred axis connecting divine and mortal realms. The idea would echo centuries later in the construction of pyramids, temples, and celestial observatories. Even the biblical Tower of Babel is thought to be a literary memory of a Babylonian ziggurat. And then there's the calendar, the very structure by which we measure our lives. Divided into months, weeks, and hours, much of this reckoning stems from Mesopotamian innovations. The sexagesimal system, counting by 60, originated there. Today we still mark 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. Why 60? Why not 10 or 100? The answer lies in a worldview shaped not just by utility, but by geometry, astronomy, and the sacred order of the cosmos. Could it be that the very way we understand time is a Mesopotamian inheritance? Their influence is found in myth as well. The story of a great flood, one that destroys the world and spares only a chosen survivor, appears first in Mesopotamian texts, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh and the tale of Atrahasis. Later, echoes of this myth would surface in the Hebrew Bible, and again in Hellenistic and Islamic traditions. Was it a shared memory of a real event, A cultural motif passed down through oral and written tradition? Or something more? Even the archetype of the civilized man owes something to Mesopotamian thought. In the tale of Gilgamesh, it is the wild man Enkidu, untamed, natural, who becomes human through food, clothing, and knowledge. The implication is clear. Civilization is not merely a condition, but a transformation, one that comes with a price. Later empires adopted Mesopotamian blueprints in more literal ways. The Assyrians, inheritors of the north, maintained the tradition of royal annals, written records of conquests and omens. The Babylonians, resurgent in the south, continued temple astronomy, mapping the stars with uncanny precision. Even the Achaemenid Persians, rulers of an empire spanning 3 continents, absorbed Babylonian methods of taxation, irrigation, and provincial governance. But here, a subtle shift occurs. By the time of Alexander the Great, Babylon had become more than a city. It was a symbol, a mystery, a place where Greek philosophers came not to conquer, but to learn. What secrets did the temples still guard? What ancient wisdom was kept by the priesthoods who tracked Venus and Jupiter with such astonishing accuracy? Some modern scholars have speculated that esoteric knowledge, mathematical, astronomical, perhaps even philosophical, was transmitted from Babylonian sages to later Hellenistic thinkers. Could the roots of Western science and metaphysics lie, at least in part, in Mesopotamian soil? Others point to a darker inheritance. Mesopotamia, for all its splendor, was a land of hierarchy and control. The gods demanded obedience. The kings spoke in divine authority. The cities functioned under rigid systems of class, labor, and punishment. Is it possible that the concept of centralized power, the notion that order must come from above, was among its most enduring gifts? And what of the Anunnaki, the enigmatic pantheon of deities that blurred the line between God, king, and celestial being? In later centuries, their myths would be reinterpreted, misinterpreted, and reimagined. Some would see them as allegory, others as metaphor, still others as something more literal. Did these stories survive because they were compelling myths, or because they whispered of something deeper, half forgotten? As history marched forward, the memory of Mesopotamia dimmed. Its languages were lost, its cities buried beneath the shifting sands of time. For nearly 2 millennia, cuneiform remained unread, its meaning a cipher locked in stone. And then, in the 19th century, the silence began to break. Archaeologists unearthed tablets, translated names, restored kings to history. Yet for all we now know, questions endure. How much of modern civilization, its laws, its logic, its very imagination, rests upon Mesopotamian foundations? What truths have we absorbed unknowingly? What might we still uncover? Beneath every discovery lies another layer, another unanswered question, another echo from a world that still shapes us, even now. As we drift farther from the banks of the Euphrates and into the unfolding chapters of time, one cannot help but wonder, how much of what we call modern is ancient? How much of the future is still bound to the past? And what secrets of Mesopotamia remain, buried beneath earth, myth and memory still waiting to be heard? The wind stirs across a vast and arid plain where once mighty cities stood. The Tigris and Euphrates, rivers that once nourished empires, now twist quietly through a land of dust, salt, and buried stone. Here, beneath modern borders and ancient skies, lie the remnants of a world that shaped the very idea of civilization. But what truly remains today of Mesopotamian greatness? Some remnants are physical. Massive ziggurats still rise like skeletal mountains from the soil, eroded but stubborn. Mud brick walls peek out beneath layers of sediment, while broken tablets, inscribed in cuneiform, the world's first writing, rest silently in museum glass or untouched beneath desert sands. These are the visible traces, the ruins, the bones of a world long past, but the deeper legacies are harder to see. They whisper through time in systems we no longer question: written law, agriculture, astronomy, mathematics. Ideas that feel modern but were born here in this land between rivers, a place once called Sumer, Akkad, Babylon. Still, we ask, how does the greatness of Mesopotamia endure? Is it only in museum cases and textbooks? Or does it live somehow in the very frameworks of the world we've built? Consider writing. The mere act of setting thoughts to symbols was a Mesopotamian invention. Without it, contracts would fade, stories would vanish, and time itself would lose memory. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the earliest known literary work, was carved into clay over 4,000 years ago, and yet its themes of friendship, mortality, and the search for meaning still echo through modern philosophy and literature. Has anything truly changed in the heart of humanity since Gilgamesh stood on the walls of Uruk and wept? Look deeper, and you'll find Mesopotamian fingerprints on science. Babylonian astronomers tracked celestial bodies with extraordinary precision, their records forming the early foundation of what would become astronomy. They mapped the heavens not for curiosity alone, but to seek patterns, omens, and the will of the gods. Today, we launch satellites into that same sky. We scan for cosmic patterns, trace planetary motion, predict eclipses. Have we simply exchanged temple rituals for telescopes? Mathematics, too, carries ancient echoes. Our 60-minute hours and 360-degree circles stem from the sexagesimal system of Sumer. What led them to count in 60s rather than 10s? Was it a practical choice? Or did they see something mystical in the divisible beauty of 60, a number that bends neatly into halves, thirds, and sixths? And then there is law. Hammurabi's code, written in stone in the 18th century BCE, offers a window into justice as it was first conceived in formal terms. An eye for an eye, it declares. Justice was visible, enforceable, divine. Today, legal systems around the world owe much to this idea that society must be ordered, that wrongs must be righted, and though our values have shifted, the structure of justice as a concept owes much to that first experiment in rule by written decree. Yet, much has been lost. Many ancient cities remain unexcavated, either buried beneath modern towns or locked away by conflict and shifting political borders. Thousands of clay tablets rest untranslated in museum archives, silent for now, waiting. What secrets do they still hold? Lost myths? Unknown histories? Entire civilizations we have yet to name? There are stories, whispers, really, of ancient technologies and forgotten wisdom, of engineering feats in irrigation, city planning, and metallurgy that seem advanced beyond their time. Some have speculated about lost sciences or esoteric knowledge preserved by priesthoods, then scattered with the fall of each empire. Were the Ziggurats simply temples, or did they serve other, now obscure purposes? Energy centers? Astronomical observatories? Theories vary, but answers remain elusive. Others point to deeper mysteries. Ancient Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki, divine beings from the heavens, bestowers of kingship and knowledge. Are they mere mythology or symbolic memories of something real? Some fringe theorists suggest these stories may reflect encounters with unknown forces, advanced beings, or even ancient visitors from the stars. Mainstream scholarship finds no evidence for such claims, but still, the question lingers, unresolved. Closer to the present, Mesopotamia's inheritance finds a strange fate. The land that once held Babylon now lies within modern Iraq, a place that has seen not only archaeological discovery, but also devastating war and looting. In 2003, during the invasion of Iraq, the National Museum in Baghdad was ransacked. Priceless relics of the world's earliest civilizations were stolen or destroyed. In one night, thousands of years of history were lost. What does it mean then, when the birthplace of civilization becomes a battlefield? Some of those artifacts have since been recovered. Others remain missing. Smuggled across borders, buried in private collections, or perhaps still lying beneath the sands, waiting to be found. Yet perhaps the most enduring trace of Mesopotamian greatness is not in objects, but in questions. Who were we at the beginning? How did we learn to live together, to build, to govern, to dream? What fears and hopes stirred in the hearts of those who watched the stars from temple rooftops, or carved stories into clay by lamplight? We often speak of Mesopotamia in the past tense, but perhaps its spirit survives in the questions we still ask and in the systems we still use, in the stories we pass on, in the laws we uphold, in the measurements we never think to question. And so we return to the land between rivers. Its temples are quiet, its streets long vanished. Yet beneath the surface, beneath soil and stone and time, the past continues to hum, like a signal just beyond hearing. A civilization that once taught the world to write still speaks. But are we listening? And what truths might we still uncover, buried not only in the earth, but in ourselves? The wind shifts softly across the plain, sighing through broken stones and crumbling bricks. Shadows fall long over ancient paths where once sandals trod and voices echoed in languages now long extinct. The sky above is the same sky they saw, endless, open, shimmering with stars. And below it, the land of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, once teeming with life, now silent. Here, in the quiet after-story and ruin, we pause. This land, Mesopotamia, has offered us fragments, temples of baked clay, cuneiform scratched into tablets, ziggurats rising like stairways to forgotten heavens. These traces form the visible skeleton of a vanished civilization. But beyond what we can hold or name, there remains something less tangible. An atmosphere, a presence, a whisper carried across millennia. What is it that continues to draw us back to this place between rivers? Why do we dream of Ur and Lagash, of the Enuma Elish and the Hanging Gardens, of Gilgamesh and gods with wings? What part of ourselves reaches out to these ancient people who rose so early in the dawn of civilization? We know what they built: cities, systems, empires. But can we ever truly know how they felt? A potter in the city of Ur, shaping clay in the quiet of morning. A scribe hunched over a tablet, fingers stained with ink and ash. A mother whispering prayers to Inanna by the flickering light of a small oil lamp. These moments, never written down, form the breath of their world, and it is this breath that sometimes still seems to stir the dust. Their understanding of time was different from ours. Circular, rhythmic, life revolved around flood and harvest, star and season, omen and offering. The heavens were not a scientific curiosity, but a realm of meaning, each movement of Venus or Mars rich with divine intent. To live in Mesopotamia was to be surrounded by symbols, every crack in the wall or pattern in the clouds a message waiting to be read. And yet, how different are we? Today, satellites track the same stars. We watch market fluctuations instead of omens in animal entrails. Our gods may have changed, or perhaps vanished, but we still seek guidance in uncertain times. Are we not, in our own way, still reading the sky? Among the most haunting aspects of Mesopotamian culture is how much they anticipated their own disappearance. Many Sumerian laments, written during times of upheaval, speak not only of cities destroyed, but of divine abandonment. The gods have gone, some say. Their shrines are empty. These texts, both poetic and prophetic, convey a sense that even in their moment of grandeur, they knew the earth beneath them was shifting. Did they sense that time itself would wash them away? Some scholars suggest that their complex spiritual and intellectual systems, so ahead of their time, were born from a deep awareness of mortality, a need to preserve, to record, to remember. The invention of writing, after all, may have been as much about resisting oblivion as it was about administration, and still, many questions remain unanswered. Why did they choose to build with clay, a material so fragile, so impermanent? Was it merely convenience? Or did they, in some quiet way, understand the temporary nature of their world? Clay crumbles, ink fades, but ideas endure. We find echoes of Mesopotamia in our alphabets, our calendars, our laws, in the stories we tell and the fears we cannot quite explain. Some theories, even the more speculative ones, suggest that Mesopotamia is not merely the cradle of civilization, but a key to something older. Lost knowledge, advanced cycles of rise and fall, an ancient pattern repeating through time. Were the Anunnaki symbols of deities, or distant memories of something else? Were Ziggurats only temples, or attempts to reach something, somewhere, long forgotten? Mainstream archaeology gives us answers grounded in stone and carbon. But between the facts, the open spaces remain. Here, speculation fills the void. Some speak of ancient wisdom encoded in myths. Others suggest that Mesopotamia's abrupt declines, its collapses and rebirths, point to forces not fully understood. Climate shifts, cosmic events, or even knowledge that once grasped was later suppressed. Perhaps it's not the collapse of Mesopotamia we should study, but its survival. Through time. Through us. In the quiet museums of the modern world, children gaze up at the steles of Hammurabi, their reflections faint in the polished glass. In universities, students sound out the syllables of Akkadian poems. In the night sky, we still mark constellations first named by Babylonian priests. Mesopotamia did not vanish. It sank, and like any ancient riverbed, its influence seeps through the layers of time, subtle, persistent, shaping everything that followed. So now, at the end of this long journey through a world lost and half-remembered, we are left with more than ruins. We are left with questions. What dreams stirred in the hearts of those who built the first cities? What secrets might still lie beneath unexcavated hills, behind unbroken seals, or in stories not yet retranslated? And, most curiously, why does their world still feel so familiar? The rivers have shifted. The gods are silent. The clay has cracked. But the echo remains. And perhaps, just perhaps, the land between rivers still speaks, waiting patiently to be heard again.